Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to day two of this first regional convening in support of parents in the Eastern Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa regions. Uh, the theme for today is basically moving on from evidence to policy to scale. Yesterday, we had these sessions where we set the scene and we went through stock taking of the situation in the region and had some specific session on issues around mental health, gender sensitive parenting, and so on. So today we are moving on from that stock taking and looking at where we are to seeing what can be done to use that evidence to generate policies, programs, and moving them to scale. And we have two main sort of themes during the plenary session, which would run until about 1440, that is 240. So the first would be about emerging issues in parenting, and the second one is implementation science from evidence to policy to scale. And we have a stellar sort of cast of speakers today. So in the interest of time, I would sort of move on straight into the first theme, emerging issues in parenting. And we have three sort of areas which we are going to be covering. The first one is around parenting in the age of digitalization. And we have Professor Lucy Kluwer here with us from Oxford, who is co-lead in the Global Parenting Initiative and has been, for me, more interesting is that she is now working to provide evidence-based parenting support in the crisis context in Ukraine and Pakistan. So, Professor Kluwer, over to you.
Good day. It's a real pleasure to join you at this exciting regional convening to support parents. What I'm going to talk about really briefly in the next 5 minutes is the most recent evidence on parenting in a digital age, both the challenges and fears and the real potential that it brings for additional and scalable support for parents. So first, let's look at some of the risks and challenges, and specifically what's the evidence for our region, for the MENA region. And of course, many parents are very concerned about the risks of online violence and digitalization for particularly teenagers, but also children. The evidence base from the region is actually quite slim, but there is evidence that rates are increasing. For example, in Saudi Arabia, two studies have found between 21% and 78% in some cases of children and adolescents reporting cyberbullying experiences. The We Protect international surveys have found that globally, there was over 1 year between 2020 and 2021, 100% increase in public reporting of online child sexual abuse. And the Internet Watch Foundation also reports increases in some really concerning types of sexual violence that for many adults, this hadn't been something that had been considered. For example, a 77% increase in self-generated child sexual material. What does this look like in this region relative to other regions? Well, this was the We Protect survey with 5,000 young people across the world, and finding rates of around 44% in the Middle East and Northern Africa region. And so as we think about these challenges, it's also really helpful to think about what might be the ways that parents and families can prevent these risks for young people. David Finkelhor is probably the leading academic working on this, and he identifies a set of pathways which he says are really paralleled to what we're trying to do to prevent violence in parenting programs and very well evidenced parenting programs more generally. We see pathways like improving parental involvement, parental monitoring and supervision, improving the capacity for children and families to disclose when abuse is happening, and to do that in such a way that, that children don't feel blamed or victimized. There's also thinking about reducing violence within the family. We know that physical and verbal abuse, the intimate partner violence between parents, put children at very much higher risk for being victimized. And there's also conscious work thinking about building community safety plans, sitting with children and adolescents and thinking and learning together about how to make being online and offline safer experiences. So let's think about what might be some innovations that might be able to trigger those pathways and support children and adolescents. And one of the real challenges that we have for parenting programs is that they are difficult to scale up to the kind of tens of millions of families who need them across the region. But some really good news is that parenting programs are increasingly being developed and tested in online versions. And this is a very new and growing evidence base. A systematic review by the World Health Organization last year found that 24 randomized control trials of online parenting programs finding equal levels of effectiveness to offline programs, although those were really very much based in the US and Europe and Scandinavia. There's new evidence which is just coming out on online parenting programs in other countries. And this is a study by Jamie Lachman and colleagues from South Africa, where they compared an online and face-to-face parenting for lifelong health programs, finding that they both prevented physical and verbal abuse with very similar rates. So really encouraging to see that. These were mobile, app-based programs. In Tanzania, we're also seeing initial evidence of effectiveness of a combination of an evidence-based parenting app. This is the UNICEF WHO established PLH program, combined with supportive WhatsApp groups, so led by a facilitator, and family groups of around 50. And we're seeing in a pilot with 200 people, reductions in physical abuse, sexual violence risk, verbal abuse, improvements in all types of parenting, and reductions in mental health distress. So we don't yet have a full evidence base in outside the US and Europe, but we are starting to see strong indications that these are promising for reducing both offline and online violence against children and adolescents. So a big thanks to partners and funders, and wishing you all the best for this fantastic regional convening. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Kluwer. I was just wondering, maybe we can give a minute to Sobia Masood, I think, because we wanted to, she's there, and I think she wants to talk about Pakistan's experience. So maybe we can give her a minute before we move on to the next speaker. Sobia, if you are there, please go on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me some time. Yes, evidence and Lucy is just comprehensively
1 minute.
explained this. Yes, explained the situation. And this is research evidence from Pakistan also shows, though this is unpublished research, that parental monitoring, parental supervision, and parental internet efficacy, when adolescents know that our parents are, they're able to handle internet well, and they can use parental controls, that evidence suggests lower rates of cyber victimization, as well as in low involvement in cyber bullying self-reporting. So I think there are parental programs are needed to that to increase parental internet efficacy, so that they could be involved with their children to and act as a protective factor for protecting them for getting involved in either in cyberbullying or victimization. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Obia. Thank you very much for that. The next speaker we have is Ala Al-Khani, who's working with UNODC and is a research associate at the University of Manchester. And given that we are living in a region with more than half of the countries in protected emergencies, I think her presentation about parenting in humanitarian context and using family skills, I think is needed and very timely. So over to you, Ala.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon from an unusually bright sunny day in Manchester. It's great to join you all with these really important discussions. Thank you, Khalid, for the introduction, and thank you, Professor Lucy, for that really thought-provoking presentation. Sadly, the regions that we're focusing on in this regional convening have had more than their fair share of war and crisis, leaving significant numbers of families living in protracted emergencies and humanitarian contexts. This really adds another layer of vulnerability to children. But what I hope to do in my presentation is to plant some seeds of hope that despite the awful humanitarian challenge circumstances that surround too many families in crisis, there is so much that we can do to promote the mental health and well-being of children and their caregivers when we utilize family skills resources. There's strong evidence that children that experience war and crisis can be protected by warm, secure parenting, so much so that the relationship that caregivers have with their children can have a more significant effect on their well-being than from the actual experiences of war that these children may have been through. But yet, until really recently, caregiver support was often ignored in the cycle of care for families in humanitarian contexts. You might ask, but can we actually reach families in humanitarian contexts with resources? And how? Would families even be able to or want to engage with such information? And what types or level of resources would be suitable? I'm going to answer those questions in a moment by using the example of our UNODC parenting model for families living in crisis settings to illustrate how a multi-level support family model can be mapped against any emerging humanitarian response or even long-term response. We began this work a decade ago at the start of the Syrian conflict. Myself and Professor Kalam at the University of Manchester conducted a caregiver and family needs assessment in refugee camps in Syria and in Turkey, where basically we sat with families working on understanding what challenges they faced in caring for their children during crisis. And we found that caregivers were really struggling as they watched their children change in their behaviors and in their emotions, while also feeling a huge sense of anxiety, lack of control, and stress. So they were facing environmental challenges, child-specific challenges, and parent-specific challenges in caring for their children. But really importantly for this conversation is that on many occasions, they were actually seeking parenting support, but there simply was none available to them. So in response to this identified gap of a lack of family skills resources, at UNODC, we developed this multi-level parenting support model for families living in crisis settings. And this really maps well against the MHPSS model of psychosocial support, where at every level, families can access support of different intensities. I'm going to touch on these really briefly to show you how you might use these in your programming. So from our research, we recognize all families can benefit from parenting information. So the bottom level here is efforts to provide basic support on a very universal level. We started by developing a parenting leaflet, and this has now emerged to recorded videos that will increase accessibility and meet the needs of low literacy. Many other light touch resources developed as interagency efforts sit at this level too, such as tip sheets led by Professor Kluwer, WHO, Parenting for Lifelong Health, University of Oxford, and many others. have been used in response, for example, to the Sudan crisis, Ukraine crisis, the Pakistani floods, and many other emergencies. So how can we make it easier to disseminate resources at this level in challenging humanitarian contexts? So having a flexible approach is really important. So we have to be able to disseminate these tools via, for example, messaging apps, printed forms, and also child immunization apps. We've done all of these things. But there's also huge value in disseminating light touch parenting resources by piggybacking onto existing aid supply routes, particularly in contexts where there's a lack of funding and logistics. And these are both typical of humanitarian contexts. And we can and have disseminated through supply routes like food parcels, water delivery, sanitary products, and bedding, for example. For example, during the peak of the Syrian crisis in 2015, we want to disseminate a parenting leaflet for families living inside a conflict zone in Syria. The only supplies that these families were receiving was bread from a local bakery. So we worked with this local bakery to insert parenting leaflets into their bread parcels. We were able to disseminate 3,000 of these bread leaflets in a conflict zone in Syria with a questionnaire, and we had an almost 60% response rate, really showing how families, even in crisis, are motivated for help. We are at the stage now globally where we have these evidence-informed tools that are ready. And with every new emerging crisis since the Syrian conflict began, we have been able to very quickly make brief adaptations and additions to meet the needs informed by field teams. And this was the case for the global COVID-19 response led by Professor Kluver and the team, and also Ukraine, and more recently with our response to the earthquake in Syria and Turkey. Moving up quickly in our model, we go to levels where we have more resources and more stable environments. And here we have a light touch intervention that consists of two things: a parenting booklet and associated conversation group. And we've disseminated these in Palestine, Lebanon, Egypt, Sudan, and Syria. Moving up now, we get to areas where we have more resources and families are more stable for a longer amount of time. As we go up the model, we're going up in intensity as well. It's important at this third level to make sure that families are in one space or one place for the entire time of the implementation of the program, for these multi-session interventions. One example of a program that sits here is the Strong Families program, an evidence-informed UNODC multi-session program, which is aimed to improve child well-being and family mental health. And key features of this program that have really ensured it's been a success in humanitarian contexts is that it was developed for families living in challenge settings, so that it's brief. There's only sessions that run over 3 weeks. It's light, so it requires an infrastructure that's really easy to mobilize and train. And training is aimed at lay people, recognizing that we may have a significant lack of people who have a psychological background. There are no royalty fees or costs, which is really key. And this really facilitates the engagement of governments and field staff with the intervention. We've implemented in over 30 countries throughout the regions we're focusing on today, from Egypt, Lebanon, Iran, Palestine, Tunis, and Sudan. So back to our model, what about interventions for children who need more specific, tailored trauma recovery support due to the trauma experiences of living through a humanitarian context? What can we provide now here? Well, one of the main benefits of having this stepped model approach is this is a really key way to recognize who needs more support, who needs this more intensive trauma recovery work that we see at the top of the model. And at the tip of this model sits the Children of War Foundation Child Trauma Recovery Intervention Teaching Recovery Techniques program for children who score really high on trauma measures. We've enhanced this existing trauma model with a stream of parenting sessions, so that while children take part in trauma recovery work, their parents also take part in the same trauma recovery work, but also learn key caregiver skills and practice these parenting skills as well. And this intervention has been shown to significantly reduce PTSD and improve child well-being and family functioning. And again, we've implemented in Syria, for example, both post-conflict and in the earthquake, in Lebanon, Egypt, and many other similar results. So this is one of the drawings of one of the participant refugee children who took part in the TRT Plus parenting program, who was having significant traumatic nightmares before taking part in the program of memories of a plane dropping bombs on his streets in Syria. And after the intervention was really able to imagine planes dropping gifts and not bombs. And I always find this image particularly moving. So finally, the UNODC model that I've just presented is just one of the ways that support can be conceptualized. There are many other excellent programs and resources available. I'm going to put a link up shortly. I just shared a lot of information with you, but please do consider too the importance of matching the available resources to the family needs too. So we wouldn't, for example, implement a trauma recovery intervention with families who have just been through an earthquake. Rather, we would wait several weeks before intervening in that way. But what we can do is really quickly disseminate light touch resources like videos and the booklets and the tip sheets to families very early on in a humanitarian crisis. Finally, we certainly can't predict what's going to happen to families at many different stages that they're going to go through, living through a humanitarian challenge setting. But we have a duty of care to provide them with all the possible support that they need, and making use of this really wonderful protective shield that caregivers can often be for their children through their early development and through adolescence. And through availing these family skills resources, we absolutely can support them and reduce the effects that war and crisis might have on children and their caregivers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ala. I think we move on to the next presentation that's on parenting and the care economy. And we have two presenters here. Zina, who's the project coordinator with ILO, and Mariam Safir from she's the director of Arab Institute of Women. So I think we start off with Zina and then follow with Mariam. Zina, over to you.
Hello, and thank you. You might hear a bit of noise when I'm speaking. That's the children's noise. So here I have also the hat of parenting, I think. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you today. Offer a new perspective into the session that you are organizing. I share screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So as you know, when we hear the term care, usually it conveys a sense of comfort and serenity. And when people hear it, they immediately think about the care recipients. In this context today, it's about children and their parents. But this is an invitation to remind everyone on the importance of giving attention to the care workers if we are to achieve harmony and social justice while working on child development. So ILO's approach to childcare starts by calling governments to invest in childcare. There is proof that investment in the sector is an opportunity for job creations, closing gender gaps, and child development. And the policy recommendations in this regard need to emerge from social dialogue. When we talk about social dialogue, it's the negotiations between government, workers' representatives, and employers' representatives. In this case, the employers' representatives could be those who oversee childcare institutions, as well as parents. And this is very important because often there is a disconnect in the policy and the workers' voice is absent, which eventually also lead to lots of gaps in protection. So these policy recommendations need to be tailored to country levels and country needs and build on emerging success stories worldwide. Advancement of childcare could only be achieved if strategies are linked to decent work. When we talk about decent work for workers, we refer to fair wages, protection from abuse and harassment in the workspace, organized working hours, and of course, social protection. And there needs to be plans that are tailored to secure, accessible, affordable, and quality childcare, which is, I think, also the focus of your interventions today. Now, as ILO, you may be aware that we work a lot on the labor standards, and we approach care through different angles, and mainly through the labor migration angle, because most care providers also are migrant workers. And when we talk about care, there is also a focus on housekeeping, childcare, care for older persons and persons with disability, in addition, of course, to other dimensions of care. But I'd like to highlight a bit that in the discourse to promote professionalization in the care sector and more protection to care workers, there is often a risk of fragmentation and hierarchy that can seriously negatively impact migrant domestic workers. These are just nuances that I'm sharing with you that we can pick up later in the discussion. But this is important because we see that the more we promote skills and skills recognition for care workers, there's a risk that migrant domestic workers who provide housekeeping work might be pushed into the lower end of the ladder and be subject to continuous abuse. So we kind of forget about them and we're pushing them down. So this is something to be mindful about when we talk also about care and protection of care workers. You might be interested to know that ILO has adopted a transformative action in the policy areas of care, macroeconomics, social protection, labor and equality, migration, and recently environment, emphasizing on the 5R framework for decent care work. And again, this is something we can talk more about later on, but the focus is to also have the gender lens and look into recognizing, reducing, and redistributing unpaid care work. I also hope to give a bit of attention in maybe in the discussion later on the unpaid care work. It's the work that we do, usually women, but more so also men, in the family, and which is not accounted for anywhere, neither in the GDPs nor on the contribution to society. So this is one element, and then provide decent work for caregivers. And the last one is to ensure representation, dialogue, and collective bargaining of care workers, which is very much in line with the fundamental principles of right at work at the ILO. So when we put the labor lens into this discourse, we have few recommendations that's also open for discussion. First of all, that childcare goes hand in hand with improvement in working conditions for the workers. This can also sustain the relationship and can retain the care workers, which we know is a challenge in many institutions and also in home-based care. We have the opportunity today to change the narrative, because after COVID, there was way more attention given to care than it was before. So governments are listening, the public sector is listening. So let's shift from care spending into care investment, from growth economy to a well-being economy, and from work that is done out of desperation as a career. Very few might think that they want to go into this career, and it used to be historically linked to a job out of desperation, lack of choice. But if we link it to proper right frameworks, it becomes recognized work with full enjoyment of fundamental principles and rights at work, it will become attractive to also more workers. And finally, using the innovative approach around social and solidarity economy to include new solutions in the sector. This is, there are many pilots that we are testing as ILO to try to see the role of cooperative and other form of social enterprises into organizing care workers and linking them with the needs of the parents and to have a more comprehensive approach into the services without leaving behind the workers and their needs. So this is in a nutshell what we thought would be important to link to your conference. And I'm very happy that the organizers were open to that. And Miriam is going to continue a bit to take things through also a different angle. And I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Go on, Dr. Mariam.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Zaina. Thank you for hosting us. So basically, I'm going to move on and talk in terms of practical measures, how we at the Arab Institute for Women were able to introduce a small change via what we do through a project that we were basically implementing called Equality for Everyone, Gender Reform from Grassroots to Government. So this was a US Middle East Partnership Initiative project, and the project aimed at promoting universal parental leave and progressive childcare policies among Lebanese working parents. And this was as an entry point to achieve greater gender equality in Lebanon. So the big picture was to do that while also promoting access to healthcare to disadvantaged women to overcome caregiving burdens. So basically, the project was very innovative. It targeted parental leave policies, as I said, within the private and public sector with a focus on policy change on the national level. And the project also targeted LEU as a pilot project. And we tried as much as we can to push for policy change, and I'll tell you more about them, regarding the parental leave policies here at the university. So basically, within the context of this project, what we did is we tried to work on a policy brief that basically detailed the importance of improving parental leave policies in Lebanon and why that is. And this policy brief basically spoke in general about the legal framework, improving gender equality through the promotion of parental leave in Lebanon. And then the method that was used was we collected data based on basically a desk review of the relevant data available, the journals, the reports, the laws. And the other thing was that we collected in-depth interviews and we did focus group discussions with women and men from different backgrounds for the purpose of understanding different perspectives around the topic. After that, what we did is we created a white economic paper, and we did 3 research papers. So the white economic paper basically spoke about the emergence of family-friendly work practices, and those work practices create a better working environment for women to increase their labor force participation. And we still have very many countries that are behind and far behind that. And the paper provided a cost-benefit analysis of the provisions of 2 central family-friendly work practices, basically related to parental leave and childcare entitlement in the Lebanese private sector. So basically, those papers were done by professors here at LEU. Another paper was on the effects of family-friendly work practices on firm productivity in Lebanon. So it basically delved into the provisions of such policies and how they influence firm performances. And the case of Lebanon was used. And the focus was on maternity leave and childcare, and using an employer-employee data covering a sample of workers and firms operating in the private sector. Another paper was done on the predictors of work productivity and maternal competence after having a baby. The study also basically tackled a sample of around 97 Lebanese mothers with children between the ages of 6 and 24 months of age, and the predictors of both these constructs and demographic variables, as well as other variables such as perceived parent-infant bonding, parenting stress, parenting guilt, and partner attachment was discussed. A final paper was on working from home in a failed state. So basically, COVID-19 has hit, and a lot of families and women were working from home. So basically, there was a paper that was done jointly by the Arab Institute for Women and our Title IX office here at LAU, where there was an online survey that took place, and we tried as much as we can to assess how these unprecedented government-imposed measures affected the employment of women who were obliged to work from home. Other than those papers, and based on the policy brief that was prepared, we created a draft law, and we did that jointly with the National Commission for Lebanese Women for the purpose of amending the labor law and to include better parental leave policies. The draft law that is now presented by the NCLW2 Parliament suggests extending maternity leave from 10 weeks to 15 weeks in Lebanon, establishing paternity leave, which adds up to 10 days, and creating breastfeeding rooms in private companies for breastfeeding and pumping mothers. It suggested 7 days of sick leave for children that parents can use during the first 7 years of a child's life, and creating nurseries in big companies in Lebanon. There's a caveat here that I have to add, that we basically did not consider that this was the ideal law, but we tried as much as we can to maneuver with the National Commission for Lebanese Women to push for amendment. We also created a national advocacy campaign in order to raise awareness among Lebanese men and women about the importance of parental leave in improving the status of women in the workforce, and to pressure decision makers in Lebanon to adopt the draft law. And we created 5 video clips. I can share them with you on the chat. So they were on parental leave policies in Lebanon, maternity leave, childcare services in companies, paternity leave and parental sick leave, and those were aired on national TV and online. So the innovative thing out of all this project is that we said, why are we working just outside the confines of LAU? Why don't we suggest amending this law or this draft law, introducing this draft law and amending our own policies at LAU? So what we did is we did an advocacy campaign at LAU, and we involved all offices related to Title IX, Faculty Senate, Staff Senate, our legal office, our HR, etc. And we basically said we need to basically walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And we approached upper management and we told them we need to amend our laws, and we don't profess those laws are ideal. Ideally, we need equal days for men and women. But and this was at the height of the economic crisis in Lebanon. The administration accepted that, and it went to our board. And now we are the only academic institution in Lebanon that basically has extended the duration of maternity leave from 10 weeks to 15, and we have 10 days of paternity leave. Unfortunately, we couldn't amend other laws related to having lactation rooms and sick leave, etc. But this is a work in the right direction. And I want to say that we are currently undergoing a gender equality assessment of us. We are doing it for LAU to see how we can improve everything related to flex hours, working from home, etc. So I just wanted to discuss this project as a small caveat in the right direction, hoping to improve laws more and hoping that this law would be endorsed. And better laws, actually, not too long ago, MP Inaya Azzeddin here in Lebanon introduced a law relating to that and on flex hours. So I just wanted to talk about how we insisted on implementing this at our university. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of the presentations, and we have about 10 minutes or so for any questions or comments. I mean, I'm not seeing much in the chat at this point in time. Although, I mean, all the resources and the publications which were mentioned in the presentations, the links are there in the chat for anybody. So if there are any questions, any queries, please.
Thank you so much to these presenters who are really bringing out the emerging issues, both in digitalization, in the care economy, in emerging, humanitarian crisis. I'm wondering, with the care economy, can you bring out, what are the linkages between those working in the parenting space and care economy? I know that, Dr. Hassan has talked about how there's sometimes an understanding of those in parenting that investing in the care economy is like neglect of children. And so how can we think about, the breaking stereotypes and finding ways for women to work equitably, but also have support as they are in their while they're forced to work in the labor market, but also to have adequate support in parenting.
Maybe I can start with commenting on this. So again, this is why it's very important when we approach the topic of care to also look into unpaid care. Unpaid care might be a sensitive word in the context of the Arab region, because as if we're saying like everything should be paid for, including the time we give to our family. And yeah, maybe we need to think a bit about the terms. But in a nutshell, what does it mean? It means that when men and women, but specifically women, who sacrifice their careers sometimes to care for either a member of the family or for children, or find it hard to return to their work and to return to their previous jobs while they missed on the promotions, and while there are many skills and advancement that happened that they were absent from. So if we are having this contextualized conversation, bringing workers, and here we're not talking just about workers, paid workers, but we're talking about unpaid care workers. So to talk to those who deliver care services and see what are their needs, and have this be reflected on the policies. With policies, it means what we are witnessing now, that teleworking arrangements, this is something that could contribute to work-life balance, and to also support parents into being present at work without missing on their job opportunities. To have extend parental leave, and also to men beyond the very limited numbers that exist today. And to have a creative investment in care structures as community-based structures, etc., versus only the institutional approach, in order, again, to create jobs and to facilitate access to quality care. So the conversation, what we call social dialogue, is really key to be able to reflect all of these and see how are we going to capture them into policies and reflect them into modalities that actually work for care workers, for unpaid care workers, and for the children.
Thank you. I think we have Sheikh Zonji, who has the hand up. So maybe you can go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for these great presentations. I just wanted to build on Katie's question as well, especially to our ILO colleagues. Just a few months ago in Jordan, you had the Arab Convening, on care, and you brought governments together. And one very interesting thing that governments themselves raised a lot, especially the ministries of labor, et cetera, it's that once you're implementing the paternity leave, for example, actually maybe fathers are not behaving in the way you would want them to support with the caregiving activities during that time. So father engagement becomes a really critical issue. So that this, again, I really want to push our ILO colleagues, to bring back to this idea of like doing policy advocacy, but how do we combine that with parenting support so that your policy results are actually then benefiting care and parent support, etc. So I'm really curious for some reflections on that as well.
Saeed, do we have time to comment, respond?
As long as we can keep it brief, we do have time.
No problem. In fact, that goes in parallel to any advocacy work that we do to change laws, in parallel to behavioral change, right? So what goes first? So with awareness raising, with proper negotiations and discussions that goes at all levels, from community level into institutional also level, this is where we can bring closer whatever policy change and reform is happening to the behavioral change. But it's important to have these as laws and regulations, because sometimes those who have the intention to be involved, if they don't enjoy the parental leave, may not be able to do so. how to couple this with behavioral change and commitment from also fathers into the parenting role and into the unpaid care work. This is something that would need time. This is something that also needs to be integrated in not just awareness raising campaigns, but also in the media and the shows that we see on in TV, etc. But a very good question, and I'll also share it with my colleagues in Jordan who are very heavily involved in working on this.
Couple of minutes more. So if there are any last minute comments, any thoughts which any of the speakers would like to share. Is this an old hand, Zonji, or is this a new one?
It's a new one if no one else has a question. I had another question for Ala. I just wanted to direct for parents in crisis. I'm wondering, Ala, are you able to share any research or any ideas of what work has been done in terms of what parents need in crisis beyond provision of parenting support? But I'm very curious about the parent voice and what parents in crisis situations are requesting or needing. So I'm very curious, Ala, if you can share with us something from the research.
Thank you so much for that question. It's a really important question. What we set out to do, even a decade ago when we started this work, was to always include the parent's voice. Never assume that we know what they might need just based on the science of what families need, was always to ask them. And throughout the last decade, we have, alongside implementation, constantly checked in with families. I mean, both from us as just UNODC, but also many other organizations and research and academic bodies too have been doing the same thing. So a lot of the work is based on the caregiver's voice. So when they request caregiver support, they're also asking for physical support, practical support. And what we know is that alongside any caregiver resource effort, you must also support caregivers in their physical and practical needs every day. And that these themselves, when they are supported and when you reduce the physical and the practical challenges of families living in crisis, you improve their mental health as well. So it's not one thing can be done in isolation of the other. It's absolutely making sure that caregivers are brought into the conversation very, very early on to know what their needs are, providing caregiver support, but providing all the other things. And very often caregiver support is just one part of a puzzle of needs that caregivers have, which is often ignored. So while funding often does come for practical needs or primary needs like food and shelter, caregiver support is very often ignored in the cycle of care. And that's why we're advocating and we're voicing our support for it. But the other needs are often, when there is funding, met as a primary support need. Lucy, would you like to add anything? I know you've done a lot of research on this too.
Just to say that Sang and Sabia are also going to be talking and thinking further about this just completely crucial topic. But I do think that the work that Ala and colleagues at UNODC has really led the way in this quite early days understanding of how we can best support families in these contexts. And we have to think of these multiple stages, both stages in the humanitarian crisis, but also stages that the family is going through. So look forward to more discussion on this.
And the link that I put in the chat has links to, it can take you to the resource page where we have our publications that form this too. So those of you who want the research side, you can follow that same link and you'll get to the publications for sure.
Right. Thank you. Thanks. I think that brings us to the sort of close of this particular session. And let me take this opportunity to thank all the speakers and the participants for their time and their patience with us. So let's move on to the next session. This is about implementation science from evidence to policy to scale. And again, we have 3 presentations, starting with my colleague from WHO, Bernadette Delmans, who's the unit head, Department of Maternal, Child and Adolescent Health. So I think we'll be playing her presentation from our end, and Bernadette would be available to take any questions. Over to you, Mohammed.
Good afternoon. My name is Bernadette Almans, and I bring greetings from the Department of Maternal, Newborn, Child and Adolescent Health at the WHO headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. I will reflect upon what we have learned about supporting parents and other caregivers in their caregiving practices and translate evidence into policy and programs that can be implemented at scale. I'd like to start by introducing to you the concept of child and adolescent health and well-being. Following the launch of the Nurturing Care Framework in 2018, an adolescent well-being framework was proposed in 2021. Since then, WHO and UNICEF have been working on the alignment as illustrated in the figure here. For health and well-being, all children and adolescents need to experience good health, adequate nutrition, responsive relationship and connectedness, security, safety, and a supportive, clean environment, opportunities for learning and education, and realization of personal autonomy and resilience. The evidence for parenting support is available in several domains of the well-being framework, but it's most explicitly formulated in relation to two strategic roadmaps. The guideline, Improving Early Childhood Development, that accompanies the Nurturing Care Framework, has 4 recommendations that state that all children need to receive responsive caregiving and early learning activities, and all parents and other caregivers need to be supported to provide it. Similarly, the Inspire 7 strategies to ending violence against children include a strategy on parenting support and is accompanied by a guideline on evidence-based parenting interventions for children 0 to 17 years that has 5 recommendations similar to the one I mentioned before. To answer the question of what we have learned about moving from evidence to policy to scale, I'd like to introduce to you the progress report that was recently released to mark the 5th anniversary since the Nurturing Care Framework was released. It is organized around 3 questions that you see listed on this slide. Based on a review of the literature, key informant interviews and a rapid survey, we learned that the framework helped stakeholders come together and speak a common language. The central role of the family in creating a stimulating, safe and secure environment became well recognized. The review brought out that there has been a 48% increase in countries that updated their national policies in alignment with the framework, and among 54 randomly selected countries, 80% reported to invest in training of frontline workers to provide support to caregivers for nurturing care. And finally, the Nurturing Care Framework led to a broader understanding of what is needed for health and well-being in the first 2 decades, as illustrated at the beginning of my presentation. A key message here is that clear and doable guidance is an important ingredient for progress. 5 strategic actions were at the basis of this progress. Here they are annotated with activities that have been documented as being important for policy and scale. In the first strategic action of Lead and Invest, multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder coordination under government leadership is essential. This will enable policies to put in place and plans to be developed that are specific for each sector. Of course, securing financing, and especially public financing, is necessary. The next strategic action speaks about the importance of involving families and communities and cultivating local champions, including in the media. When it comes to services, the challenges to build a workforce fit for purpose can be large, but ensuring fidelity and quality of training and mentorship and involving civil society and other actors, progress can be made. Data are important not only to monitor progress, but also to make timely adjustments if the investments are not leading to expected results. And finally, there is the strategic action of scaling up and innovation that recognizes the potential of the digital age and of private sector engagement and the importance of implementation research. A key message here has been: start small, learn, adapt, expand, and when you have shown that the interventions have an effect, move to scale. Throughout the process, advocacy is essential, and this is best done using local data. Here is just a brief reminder of the evidence for multiple delivery options, which work best when one can reinforce the other. At the bottom, you see multimedia and integration in available services for universal support. In the middle, home visits, group sessions, and digital outreach for families and children at risk. And in blue, the specialized services that are needed for families and children with serious difficulties that need indicated support. For caregivers to be able to provide their children responsive and nurturing care, a holistic approach is needed. Evidence stresses the importance of the enabling environments around the child, the caregivers, the communities, the services, and the policies. Simply focusing on one layer will not get us very far, and thus policies need to be in place to provide financial stability and social protection, especially for the most vulnerable families. Integrated family and child services need to be available that give attention to the needs of the caregiver as well as those of the child. Communities need to be empowered to create child-friendly, safe and secure environments, and families need to be supported in their capacity to have positive interactions with their children. Operationalizing parenting support does not mean starting from the beginning, but rather building on what already exists. We seek to remember, strengthen, and add. Remember refers to identifying and comprehensively mapping what is already done across all relevant sectors and levels and sustain those efforts. Strengthen refers to identifying opportunities to improve either the coverage or quality of services or collaboration and coordination across sectors. And last, add refers to adding actions and interventions to ensure all families and children are reached with evidence-based parenting support. It will take a whole of society and whole of government approach to support families, and no single actor can do it alone. I like to close with an illustration in the Nurturing Care Framework Progress Report. It illustrates that much was achieved to generate inputs, but much remains to be done to get to the outcomes and the impact that the Nurturing Care Framework intends to achieve. The parenting initiative that we are discussing today will call for effort, persistence, learning, and resilience. But if we work together, we can make sure every child and every family reaps the benefit. With this, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our further discussions.
Thank you very much. I think what we are hearing repeatedly is that there is a need for a multi-layered, multi-sectoral response which builds on existing resources. And we now have the next speaker, Tuja Michael. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, who is a research scientist at Global Ties for Children at New York University. So Tuja, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Do you all hear me? And can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Duja Mikhail. Thank you for the introduction. It's such a pleasure to be talking to you all today in this very important convening. I'm a research and data scientist at NYU Global Ties for Children, And my talk is going to be about designing and measuring the impact of parenting intervention, best practices in the Middle East and North Africa region. Talking about measurement and design is not usually the most engaging, but I'll try to keep it as engaging as possible by talking about a case study from our recent work in Lebanon with the Ahlan Simsim initiative to illustrate some of the points that I'll be making. Ahlan Simsim initiative was led by Sesame Workshop and the IRC with funding from the MacArthur Foundation, and Global Ties for Children was the evaluation partner. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to start with talking about parenting in the region. We all know that parenting young children can be quite stressful, particularly when resources are limited, echoing a lot of the previous presentations. Basic provision of elements that would help the child survive, like health and nutrition, often take priority over the provision of nurturing environment, which is needed to promote the learning of the development. As Dr. El-Thani said, stressors like exposure to violence, forced displacement, economic downturns, or health crises such as COVID-19, which are prevalent in the region, can also affect the caregiver's ability to provide secure, responsive relationships and promote developmental opportunities. And I want us to all be aware of this context while listening to my presentation and while designing and evaluating parenting programs. On to the parenting programs in the Arab world. The Doha International Family Institute provided the most comprehensive review of parental programs in the Arab world in 2019, and they had identified 108 parental programs across the Mashriq, the Maghreb, the Gulf, and the less developed countries. More importantly, they identified the challenges and gaps in the literature and the knowledge that we have on these programs. And among these challenges are the absence of quality research that rigorously evaluates the programs. This could be either impact evaluations or process evaluations. There's also an absence of feedback from the participants during the design, implementation, and post-implementation phases. There's a lack of program documentation, of course, besides the programs implemented by international NGOs, which makes it hard to identify models that have worked and that could be improved and worked with. And the final one is lack of frameworks, including the theories of change that incorporate caregiver mental health and well-being. I'm going to move on to talk about the best practices in the design of the interventions, and then we'll talk about the measurement. So we know that the programs need to work for the deliverers and the recipients alike. They need to address their needs, fit into their daily schedules, and meet them where they are. They also need to take into account the contextual factors on the macro, meso, and micro scale that they operate under. The design and implementation stages should include qualitative research with caregivers and those that deliver the program, and should not blindly assume that Western models will address local needs. That's very important. Programs also need to pay particular attention to the relationship between those delivering the program and the caregivers themselves. And we have evidence on that from our work on Ahlan Simsim that I will talk about in a bit. On to the best practices for measuring the impacts of these programs. This is a dry slide, so bear with me. Before evaluating any program, there needs to be a clear theory of change, and this theory of change lays out the pathways through which we expect the intervention and the activities that we are delivering to the parents to lead to specific outcomes of interest. And we also need to identify the outcomes that we want to move before any evaluation happens. Talking about the evaluation, there are two types that are extremely important. The first one is rich process evaluation, and this is about the implementation experiences and meaning making of the program. And these types of evaluations critically examine the theory of change and its assumptions that I was talking about a little bit ago. The other type of evaluations is randomized controlled trials, impact evaluations. And these ones more formally test the causal relationship in the theory of change and the outcomes. Both of these are extremely important, and I just wanted to add that randomized controlled trials improve the knowledge base on what works, how it works, and for whom it works, which is very important. I wanted to mention that mixed methods research provide the space for all of the above to happen, and it's important to consider it while evaluating any programs. Randomized controlled trials and mixed method research on parenting programs in the region are rare, as was mentioned before. But I want to highlight that there has been an uptick in the last 4 to 5 years, and I will be now talking about one of the RCTs that we ran with the Ahlan Simsim initiative as a case study to illustrate how what I mentioned can be operationalized. It's about the remote early learning program in Ahlan Simsim families in Lebanon. A bit about the remote early learning program. It's an early childhood education program delivered through WhatsApp, and it leverages the caregivers to do early childhood education activities with their children at home. It focuses on emergent literacy, numeracy, social and emotional learning, and motor development. And teachers with previous ECE experience run virtual classrooms with groups of 5 to 6 caregivers, 3 sessions per week for 11 weeks. Each session is about 30 minutes, where they introduce the material to the caregivers and give them tips about how to apply these lessons with their children. About the design and adaptations that we did on this program. So the design phase of the remote early learning program included qualitative research, which was extremely important. It included interviews with teachers and caregivers to understand the challenges that they face in the context, understand the perceptions that they have about early childhood education and parenting, and particularly to identify the supports that they need. This started during the design phase. We used the eco-cultural framework to understand how the program fits into their daily routine and made extensive adaptations accordingly. We changed the teacher training. We also have a system of follow-up, and we improved the program significantly as a result of this qualitative work that we did in the initial stages. This qualitative data, along with demographic information about caregivers, including education level and literacy, also led the IRC to want to add a remote parenting support component in families, and it focuses on psychosocial support, emphasizes the importance of early childhood development, and seeks to equip caregivers with positive parenting skills. Ahlan Simsim Families was delivered by ECD facilitators in the same virtual classrooms as the RELP, so it was an add-on, and it was concurrently at the same time during the same 11 weeks. And sessions were delivered once a week for the 11-week period, and each session lasted about 25 to 30 minutes. On to the evaluation of the program, the outcomes and the results. So we designed a 3-armed randomized controlled trial with a treatment group that received the remote early learning program, another one that received the remote early learning program plus Ahlan Simsim Family Juice, which is a parenting support program, and we had a control group. We had very specific outcomes in mind: child development outcomes, parenting outcomes, and caregiver well-being outcomes. And we also ran mediation analyses. We know that the remote early learning program and remote early learning program plus Ahlan Simsim Families had significant positive impacts on emergent literacy and numeracy and overall child development, as well as child play. The size of the impacts was pretty impressive, and it was found to be in the range of those seen in evaluations of 9-month in-person preschool programs around the world. Despite reporting a change in their understanding of the importance of play, we found no quantitative impacts on caregiver beliefs about learning through play and about the importance of SEL. But we did find a large impact on caregivers' report of learning activities with their children, which is great. And although caregivers from both treatment arms said that the program bolstered their own and their child's well-being and helped to offset the negative effects of the economic security and political crises in Lebanon, we did not find quantitative impacts on parenting stress, parenting self-efficacy, or caregiver depression and anxiety symptoms. On to the last slide of key takeaways. I wanted to highlight a couple of things besides what I've been talking about. And the first one is the crucial role of the relationship between the caregiver or the parent and the person delivering the program. we found in our studies that this relationship and the quality of that relationship really mediates all of the outcomes, or a lot of the outcomes that we get. So it's very important when we train these deliverers to support the caregivers, to train them to deliver the programs in ways that they will gain the trust of the caregivers. I also wanted to say that the flexibility and adaptability in implementation of this particular study played a vital role in meeting the unique needs of caregivers. Caregivers in the region are responsive to things that they perceive as important to their children. We had no issues whatsoever with caregiver engagement, and caregivers went above and beyond to participate in these virtual classrooms. And we have examples from caregivers going to the roofs of their neighbors' buildings to catch some Wi-Fi so they can participate. And this great engagement with the RELP program might have been because the program was framed as school, and caregivers in the region consider schooling their children as very important. The last point that I'm going to make is that we should not always assume that Western literature applies. It's great to base our programming on literature and whatnot. But despite beliefs that caregivers with low education and literacy levels cannot be successfully engaged in early learning, this program worked equally well for caregivers of all education levels, which was a great pleasant surprise to all of us. Most caregivers expressed satisfaction with the program, and some even reported learning alongside their children, which was great. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I'm going to stop sharing, and I look forward to the discussions.
Thank you very much. I think we can move on to the next presentation, and there are a couple of queries in the chat. So maybe Duja, you can have a look at it, and either you can respond in the chat, or maybe
Sure,
when we have time for discussions, we can do that. So the next presentation is by Mr. Aziz Keshaw. If I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And he'll be talking about scaling parenting interventions in the experience of Morocco civil society to support government scaling up. So, Dr. Aziz, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope that my presentation is visible to everyone.
Yes, it would be helpful if we can have it in presentation mode.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to invite me and our foundation from Morocco to present our parenting interventions and involvements.
Mr. Aziz, can you put it on presentation mode?
Yes.
If you can't, then let us know.
It's not working? It's working? It's going?
It is working, but maybe I'm just wondering if you can. It would take waste time, so let me. Yep.
And now? Yes?
Yeah, that is perfect. Good.
Okay, thank you very much. So everybody knows that the importance of parental involvement in child development is very important, and a lot of studies develop this issue. I just want to share with you some of these studies. And the engagement of parents and families with the children and with the educators are very important to the behavior of children and their health and their development of psychological and sociological development and skills, of course, of children. Parent involvement. We can see it through 5 steps, and this is the result of a lot of studies, as I said. For example, parents and educators are the first who have the most influence on early childhood development compared to their peers. And the second one, parental involvement, is defined as parents and other family members work together with professionals in in pursuit of common goal, where the relationship between family and professionals is based on decision making and shared responsibility and mutual trust and respect between family and the educators. According to another study, the knowledge and the parenting skills, the communication between home and school, the volunteering at school and its in the community, supporting children, learning at home, of course, too, and involvement in decision-making and assistance of children, and collaborating with the community between educators and parents. All these studies give us in Morocco and in our foundation to be convinced that to develop a parental support program and to use it all across the country. Our foundation is managed now more than 20,000 of classes in Morocco, and we give preschool education to more than 400,000 of children in Morocco, which is representing 70% of children preschooled in Morocco. We base our strategy on 4 pillars. The first one is parents meeting. The second one, knowledge exchange workshops between parents and educators. The third one, videos and capsules. And the fourth one,
Dr. Aziz, your slides are not moving. Is it?
I think I will. You are seeing the slide?
Now they are, yes.
Yes, excuse me. You have my presentation. You can share my presentation with all participants of the class. As I said, we base our strategy on 4 pillars. The first one, parents meeting. The second one, knowledge exchange workshops. And the third one, capsules, videos. And the fourth one, thank you. And the fourth one, participation in preschool activities. And I will explain each of 4 pillars. The first one, parents meeting. If you can move to the next slide. Yeah, thank you very much. It's about parents meetings, and we organize that through collective parents meetings during the year. And we focus the discussion with the parents on the first thing, to present educators and to know each other, and to give the general presentation about the school and about the activities, pedagogical programs and methods that we use in our school. And we present to parents all activities that we will do with their children. And we have a second kind of parents meeting. It's in individual meetings. Every educator meets parents of each children to discuss specific elements about every children. The second pillar is about the knowledge exchange workshops, and we organize that during the year too. From September to May of each scholar year. The first meeting or the first workshop exchange is about how to succeed the transition between family and the school, and we present our pedagogical strategy and our program activities. The second meeting is the role of parental involvement in preschool in the success of children academic or scholar progress or education progress. The third one is about family and school relationship. For January, it's about relationship, how to develop the autonomy of child in the school, and in March it's about how to use digital content by parents with their children at home, because as you know, it's a big issue, digital content in this moment. And May, the last meeting, the last workshop is how to support language development in early years for every child. The third pillar is about some videos, learning videos that we prepare by educators. We have a special team to prepare videos and capsules that we share with parents, and it's about four items. The first one is about behavior and discipline. The second one is about health. The other one is about activities, robotic activities and games that parents can play with children at home, which are linked with the pedagogical program of our schools. And the four items about how to give advice to parents to be sure that everything is going correctly between school, parents, and the children. The fourth one is how to succeed participation of parents in preschool activities. And we have a lot of examples about that. We have, for example, parents came to school to read some stories or to be part of playing with children in psychomotricity or
I think we seem to have lost Dr. Aziz. Video seems to have frozen. Dr. Aziz, can you hear
me?
us?
Hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yes, yes. So I was talking about the fourth pillar. It's participation of parents in preschool activities, and I said that we invite parents to be part of education and pedagogical and all activities in school. So parents are invited individually or by group, and parents play with children and do some art plastic, some theater activities, read some stories to children, to give some music playing, or first Lego workshops, etc. And this kind of activities, it's for us, it's a strong relation to build a strong relationship between parents, educators, and children. And we do some studies to evaluate this kind of activities, and it's give a lot of success in the children development. In conclusion, if you want, this approach that we use, we can say that our foundation succeed to give an example, and a real example, how to succeed if you want, the comeback of parents to school activities. And what we are doing now is to prepare some documents about this experimentation and this development to governments, because we have a strong relationship with the Ministry of Education Preschool in Morocco. That is the ministry responsible of developing education in Morocco, and we are the big partner of governments in this issue. And we are developing or generalization this kind of work and sharing it with the other actors of preschool in Morocco, private and public actors, and to share it, of course, with the other countries who can have a need to have our experimentation. So as a last conclusion, thank you for giving us this opportunity, and I am in your disposition to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aziz, for this extremely important presentation. And at the same time, I think what was good about it is that you provided us with the details. So if anybody's interested in replicating the work, then at least you provide them with a bit of a roadmap how to move forward. I think we do not seem to have any questions at this point in time that I can see. Yeah, so it seems that we are the ones generating the questions. So Katie has a question. So Dr. Aziz, can you describe how your country was able to reach the level of scaling up where you are reaching 70% of the preschool children, as you mentioned?
Yes.
And second question is directed to Duja, that can you share what is the takeaway? If there is one thing that diverse types of parenting programs need to take into account regarding measurement of parenting programs. So Dr. Aziz, over to you, and then Duja.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Khalid. In Morocco, we launched in 2018 national program. We called the program the National Program for Generalization and Development the Early Childhood and Preschool Program. And the objective is to work through 10 years from 2018 to 2028 to give preschool place to every child in Morocco. And at the beginning, we have at this date less than 50% of Moroccan children in age of preschool served by preschool actors, and the actors was at this moment just private sector and CSO actors. From this date, we with the government and we with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Interior, we build a big program planned and with annual planification, and we are creating from this moment 5,000 classes every year through the country, and we have more than 10 actors between public and private actors associated to this program with the supervision of Ministry of Education, and the ministry creates classes with other partners, build classes or use other classes when it's possible, and the other actors, like our foundation, national actors or local actors, we sign a contract with the government to manage these classes. So our job is to recruit and train the educator, and to develop pedagogical program in the respect of national standards, and we have finance from the government to buy equipment, to buy furnitures, and to buy all items that we need in the class. So the contract between governments and actors give us this possibility to do the job very quickly. So if each actor is concerned, concentrates its efforts on its own prerogative and its own obligations, legal obligations, and I think it's a new kind of development education. As you know, between 2018 and now, in 5 years, we have developed more than 20,000 of classes very quickly, and with the details reporting to governments, and I think it's a good example, and I am in your disposition to give another presentation if you want, another context, how we do it, how do we modelize the program, and how we build it, and how we evaluate this program. Thank you.
Right. Thanks. I think, Duja, thank you very much for putting your answer in the chat. We have 2 hands up. So Dr. San, why don't you go first? And then Dr. Sabri can go second.
Thank you so much for all the presenters. First, for Bernadette, thank you so much, Bernadette, for this presentation about the Nurture Care Framework. After 5 years, it was a landmark in the nurturing, and the development, care and development of children since 2018. And the report demonstrates that very well. That was issued. I want to highlight here and ask you, Bernadette, that one aspect of the Nurture Care Framework was the contextualization to the crisis situation. Should we think together more on this GISP to be contextualized the same? I talked about it a little bit yesterday, that we need, I think, at least a suggestion that we need to contextualize this parent support to situations, especially in crisis, which is very needed and very important, so that we'll not end up as preachers among believers, if you want to say. Second, for Duja, of course, one month ago, we had a joint webinar on this research between the Arab Network and our friends in Sesame. And one issue which we can highlight, and Duja, of course, you can elaborate more on that, the innovative play-based programs in crisis, which was very important in our experience at the Arab Network, and of course in Sesame and IRC in Lebanon and other countries. Third, I think the experience of Morocco, my friend Aziz talked about. I think this should be documented and disseminated, and it could be replicated, and it's a very important to take lessons learned from what Aziz did in Morocco. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Ghassan. Dr. Sabri, why don't you go ahead? Dr. Sabri, can you hear us?
شكرا جزيلا. أنا كنت عايز أتكلم شوية عن إساءة المعاملة للأطفال واللي موجودة في كل البرامج شوية، والسؤال اللي دايما بيطرح نفسه هو إحنا ليه كل ما بنقيس الإساءة بنلاقيها بنزيد داخل برامجنا داخل مجتمعاتنا وهكذا. في الحقيقة اللي حلل لي السؤال ده أكتر الأطفال أنفسهم من خلال دراسة عملتها مع الأطفال. سألت مجموعة من الأطفال هو انت شايف لما بابا او ماما يضربوك ده كويس ولا لا؟ فقالوا البعض قال ان ده كويس لانه بيربيني، والبعض قال لا ده شيء مش كويس. لما دورت لقيت الاطفال اللي قالوا ده شيء كويس بيربينا وبيعلمنا وده كان ادراكهم للاساءه هم كانوا الاكثر تربيه تسلطيه من الأهل، وبالتالي القهر ولد هذا الموضوع، وبالتالي تستمر الإساءة في مجتمعاتنا، لأنه ببساطة شديدة جدا هو منظور الحكم على الإساءة هو اللي عندنا فيه مشكلة. يعني كتير من الإساءات بتتم لأن إحنا لا نعتبرها إساءة، فمن المهم إن إحنا يعني نشوف هذا المنظور. الحلول السريعة لده كان من خبرة كنت مشارك فيها مع المجلس القومي للطفوله والنمو واليونيسيف في مصر، وهي لسه غالبا في طور النشر، هو ان احنا عملنا دليل كفاءات المتعاملين مع الاطفال. المتعاملين هنا ليس فقط المدرسين والميسرين المباشرين للاطفال، لكن في الوزارات الثانيه او الوزارات المعنيه اي عامل او متعامل مع الطفل في عمر الطفوله المبكره زي وزاره الثقافه ووزاره الشباب، كل هذه الوزارات. كانت الفكره الاساسيه هي ان يكون عند هذه العاملين، كل العاملين بالمناسبه، من اول عامل النظافه حتى يعني مدير المؤسسه، منهم يكون عندهم بعض الكفاءات اللي حطينا 4 اسس ليها، هي دعم النمو، الحمايه للطفل، ازاي نتعامل مع سلوك الطفل، وازاي نتعامل مع الاهل. دي كانت ال4 حاجات. اعتقادي ان العمل من خلال الحكومات على مبدا ان كل المتعاملين يكون لديهم حد ادنى من الكفاءات ده امر ايجابي في كل برامجنا. شكرا لكم. انا ممكن اشير الدراسه الخاصه بالادراك الاساءه، يعني هشيرها لحضراتكم.
With respect to the perception of abuse.
بالظبط.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Bernadette,
Dr. Khaled, I just wanted to mention one thing. Thank you, first of all, Bernadette, for answering the question in the chat. I just wanted to highlight one thing. Besides national level indicators that we have, whenever we want to improve the knowledge base that currently exists, particularly in the MENA region where there's very little that we have already, it's important when we design the impact evaluation studies to focus very much and start from a point of a theory of change, because we have a diversity of programming, as Katie mentioned. And it's important to know how each program and the activities of each program would lead into the outcomes that we're interested in. And there's very much a lack of this connection right now, and it's a black box. And I think in order to improve measurement and improve what we know about what works in the region and what doesn't, it's important to have these theories of change and to examine each and every linkage of them in a very rigorous way, either in an impact evaluation or in a process evaluation. I just wanted to highlight that currently it is really a huge black box, and whatever studies that are going to be funded in the future, we hope that this black box is going to start to be deciphered step by step, so that future programming can use that learning, and so that we can get to the outcomes that we need.
Right. Thanks, Roja, for that. I think that brings us to the end of this particular session, and I think it might be useful that instead of going for the break, it might be useful if we can play this video now before we transition to the parallel sessions. And we have two parallel sessions today.
Dr. Khaled, may I
Bernadette, I would have to sort of stop at this point.
Okay. I'm sorry. I will answer Dr. Gassan's in the speech.
Yeah, you can put your comments in the chat if you please, if you could, because we need to move on to the parallel sessions, which are around policies and services, parallel session A, and parallel session B is about platforms for reaching parents. And my understanding is that the moderator for session A is going to be Afrodita from UNICEF, and for session B, it's Muhammad Abu Suleiman from UNICEF. Is that correct? Good. So, Muhammad, why don't we have the video before we transition off?
السلام عليكم.
هلا ابو خالد. ما له حق كثير، شو بدك تعمل؟
والله هربان من هالولاد. حط اياهم قبل ما الولاد يشيقوهم على الاخر.
لا يا رجل، ما لهم اولادك ان شاء الله عنهم زي الملائكه.
ملائكه؟ اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، كل ما بيكبروا بصيروا اصعب ومجننين.
الله يكون بعونك. طيب شو بتساوي عشانهم؟
ما في اشي ظابط معي، ما بردوا لا علي ولا على امهم، ما ضل الا ابلش ارشف فيهم.
لا يا اخوي، مش ناقص غير باقي تزيد على حالك المصاريف. طيب قول لي شو بيعملوا؟
شو بدي اقول لك؟ اقل ما فيها عندهم كسل عمري ما شفت زيه. بيعملوش اشي مفيد طول النهار.
طيب مش يمكن بيتعلموا الكسل منك؟
ما لا، انا بعلمهم الكسل؟ انا بشتغل طول النهار زي الدينامو.
ما انا عارف، بس لما تروح على البيت شو بتساوي؟
يعني شو بدي اساوي؟ بكون تعبان وبدي ارتاح.
فهمت عليك. شوف يا اخوي ابو خالد، انا مع حبسه كورونا بقعده البيت علمتني كم شغله.
زي شو؟
شوف يا سيدي، قبل الكورونا كنت اخلص شغل بالمحل واريح شوي واطلع اسهر برا، وبس اروح بلقى الاولاد نايمين. مع حبسه كورونا وقعده البيت حسيت انا قديش مقصر معاهم وبعيد عنهم. اولادك قد ما كبروا بيضلوا بحاجتك ولازم تضلك قريب منهم.
طيب ما انا بشتغل طول النهار عشانهم، هم عارفين الحكي.
هم عارفين انك تطلع وبتغيب طول النهار علشانهم، بس بيشوفوك لما بترجع البيت بتاكل وبتشرب وبتنام، وامهم بتشتغل بهالبيت.
يا سلام، يعني شو بدك اسوي لهم؟
بسيطة، اقعد معاهم، احكي معاهم، شاركهم همومهم مشاكلهم، تقرب منهم، شارك بالبيت وخاصة معهم، خليك قريب منهم وساهم بتربيتهم، شارك مع امهم بالتربية.
يا ابو علي بس مش هيك الشغله، التربيه هي شغله امهم، انا شو فهمني بالقصص؟
ما انا كنت مفكر مثلك، بعدين اكتشفت انه الموضوع مش فيزياء. كل ما قضيت وقت مع اولادك كل ما صرت قادر تعرفهم احسن وبيتعلموا منك. ترى التربية مسؤوليتكم انت وام خالد. في فترة ابني بطل ياكل وبطل يضحك وصار انطوائي. يا زلمة بتحسوا طفل كل هموم الدنيا على راسه. خفت، وبصراحة لما حكيت معه اكتشفت انه اولاد صفوا بتمسخروا عليه. علمته وشرحت له كيف يتعامل معاهم وانحلت القصة، وصارت شخصيته اقوى وصار يحكي لي على كل شيء. في مواضيع اولادك بيكونوا مرتاحين اكثر لما يناقشوها معك. وبعدين ما تنسى اولادك بيتعلموا منك وانت قدوتهم وبيتعلموا منك كل شيء.
والله واللي بسمعه بديش فضل امهم، يمكن تعرف تتعامل معهم احسن مني.
بيتهيأ لك، ما انا كنت مفكر مثلك. انا مرتي اضطرت تروح عند اهلها لفتره، اهلها مريضين وضليت لحالي بهالبيت مع الاولاد واصغرهم كان بالحفاضه.
طيب
اولها خفت وعصبت، قلت كيف بدي طعمي وكيف بدي غير وكيف بدي نظف. بيني وبين نفسي بعدين قلت اذا مرتي قادره ليش ما انا بقدر؟ مش ناقصني اشي ومشيت الامور يا سيدي.
جد تخيل حالي ما بقدر اعمل الشيء اللي عملته.
زي ما انا قدرت انت بتقدر. الحياه شراكه يا ابو خالد. وبعدين اكيد بدك تقول معي حق واقف فوق راسي اقول مقصب ايدي.
تربية الأطفال مسؤولية الأم والأب معا، وتحمل المسؤولية هي أساس الشراكة.
Okay, so Mohammed, our competent IT person from the WHO Middle East, Eastern Mediterranean office, he's mentioned that he's created the breakout rooms. And for those who would like to join around policies and services, you can stay in the plenary in room A. You don't need to go anywhere. And for those who would like to join platforms, meaning communications platforms, faith-based platforms, mobile midwifery platforms, different methods of reaching parents, you can join Parallel Session B, and you can click on the 3 dots on your lower right side, and then click on Join Breakout Room, and you can transfer to the other room. Anyone who needs any help, please put it in the chat, and Mohammed or Sabine or others can help move you into your rooms.
So Mohammed, do we have the right to move anywhere or not? No, I cannot see anything.
Again, anyone who would like to go to Group B, click on the 3 dots on the lower right-hand corner, and then click Join Breakout Room. It will take you to Session B. And if you'd like to stay here, you'll be in Policies and Procedures. And Aphrodita, you can bring your speakers to begin joining this room.
Okay, Katie, if I may, if I put the 3 dots, I just see close all rooms. I don't find the option to go to another room. Other people may have the same problem.
I think you actually have to scroll down the name.
Bernadette, when you click on the 4 dots down there, which says breakout room,
Noted,
when you click
noted.
on it,
Thank you.
You would see that.
Thank you.
Bernadette brings up a great point. It's 2 clicks. So you have to click once on the dots and then again on Join Breakout and then again on Parallel Session B.
So Katie, do we still wait for people to move? Because I see there's...
Please, Aphrodita, go ahead.
Aphrodita, I think you can start your
Okay.
session, please.
Okay, very good. Hi, colleagues. I only wanted, before we start, to check with Mohammed, the IT colleague from WHO, if I need to unmute the speakers or they can just unmute themselves. Not sure if Mohammed is with us here. Anyway, so let me introduce myself. Welcome to... Sorry?
Aphrodita, you will need to unmute the speakers. All right?
Where? I don't know where to unmute. Where is the option to unmute?
Click on Ask to Unmute.
No, I don't see that. That's my problem. Where is that?
Okay, I will do it from my side.
Maybe if you can do it from your side, Mohammed. Thank you so much. Thanks. So, colleagues, welcome to Parallel Session A, which is about policies and services. My name is Aphrodita Swahil. I'm with UNICEF Regional Office for Middle East and North Africa. I'm an education specialist and early childhood development focal point for the regional office. I'm very happy to be here. I will be your moderator of this session. We have 1 hour time to discuss about the topics relevant to policies and services to reach to parents. And I will be having with me to help us with the note-taking and reporting back to the plenary my colleague from GISP, Amanda. I hope she's here. I mean, I don't see her. But yes, Amanda is here. And so both of us will be actually taking the key highlights from the discussion that is going to happen in this session. So just to start maybe by saying that It's very important to hear, especially the first day and today, about the importance of providing support to parents of children and adolescents. And we've heard about some interesting global and regional frameworks, as well as partnerships to strengthen the work for parenting. And in particular, this is very important for our region because of the multiple deprivations, fragility, poverty, crisis that is affecting families, communities, but most importantly, children and young people. So that's why we always say that there is a need for structured, systematic, and continuous support for parents. And for that, we need to have good policies in place that will actually influence services and enhance services which should be available, affordable, accessible to parents, especially parents who come and who are from the most vulnerable groups. That's why I think that this session has been conceptualized in a way that we will be actually answering to one of the key questions, and we're going to hear from our presenters about how we can advance the uptake of policies and services to reach to parents. And we are going to hear from the experience of Qatar, how they have actually used policies to influence, used evidence to influence policies and some practical recommendations. We are going to hear from Egypt how they have actually used social programs and the schemes, the social protection scheme to support parents in need and families. And a very interesting topic about how integration of domestic violence prevention has happened in the primary healthcare system in Iran. So with all of this in mind, I just want to let you know that our presentations are going to be mixed. We're going to have two presentations in English. There will be one in Arabic. So our colleague from WHO, Dalia, I think she has volunteered to help us with summarizing the for the translation in the chat box. So I hope Dalia is here with us. So for those who don't speak Arabic, might be useful to follow the chat box. And I would encourage you, if you have questions or if you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, if you can please put it in your chat box, and we will try to follow and hopefully answer to them. So I will start with, I will share the recording of, and we have here with us, we have with us Dr. Dana from Dana Al-Khalut from the Doha International Family Institute, who's going to tell us about how institutions can support policy to advance parenting. So let's see.
We cannot hear the audio. If you want me to share from my side.
Sorry, once again.
I can't hear the audio. So
You cannot hear the audio?
yes. So I will share it from my side.
If you have your version, Mohammed, can you share it from
Yes,
your
I will
side?
share it.
Please.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'll be talking today about policy development, how institutions can support policy that advances parenting, focusing specifically on the case of the Doha International Family Institute, which is a member of Qatar Foundation for Education, Science, and Community Development. I'd like to start by giving you a quick introduction about DIFI, which is a global policy and advocacy institute working to advance knowledge on Arab families and promote evidence-based policies at the national, regional, and international levels. We use an impact model which is focused on three main pillars, and that's research, policy, and advocacy. So with research, we produce evidence through high quality policy-oriented research, which is utilized for policy and program transformation, in addition to fostering knowledge on Arab families at the national, regional, and international levels. The policy then transforms this evidence into policy outputs and promotes the development of policies and programs and best practices to strengthen and support families. And then advocacy, we advocate for family cohesion and promote the transformation of evidence-based policy and program outputs into measurable impact, while nudging for change and engaging stakeholders and enhancing DIFI's visibility and outreach at the same time. So I'll be giving some examples from DIFI's research. These are only some examples that I've selected that are linked somehow to parenting. And I'd like to highlight here that all of our reports can be found on our website. So DIFI conducted a study on parenting programs in the Arab region in 2018, which mapped the parenting education programs across the Arab countries. Now, the study had various mixed methodologies, but I'm going to focus on the focus group discussion aspect, which aimed to evaluate the different parenting programs in 3 Arab countries. That was Jordan, Oman, and Morocco. And I'd like to highlight some of the commonalities of the focus group discussion outcomes, which were that, number one, 100% of participants in the parenting education programs were females. Now, this outcome can be consistent with the stereotypical understanding of gender roles in the MENA region, where fathers are considered breadwinners and mothers as caregivers. But it could also mean that we need to dig a little further and try to understand why fathers are not attending these parenting education programs. For example, it could potentially be that they don't have the flexibility to do so, to leave work to attend, or that the parenting education programs are being held at times where the fathers can't attend, etc. Secondly, the enrollment of parents, mostly mothers, in parenting education programs is driven by the need to know parenting techniques, especially in relation to children with behavioral issues. Now, another driving force behind parental enrollment in parenting education programs was to protect their children and adolescents from technology risks, early childhood needs, as well as resolving family conflicts. Now, common positive outcomes of the parenting education programs were developments in children's personalities, the ability of parents to eliminate negative behavior, their ability to manage time and be able to communicate better with their children. And some of the common negative outcomes that were mentioned throughout the 3 focus groups was that there was an absence of a focus on youth within the programs. Another study we conducted was on work-family balance, challenges, experiences, and implications for families in Qatar in 2019. And this report aimed to identify the challenges and the experiences of working parents in Qatar and to provide evidence to examine existing work-family balance policies in Qatar. I'd like to highlight that some of the findings included that the majority of participants stated that the duration of parental leave caused the main challenge towards them achieving work-family balance. In Qatar, the current maternity leave in most sectors is 50 or 60 days, and current paternity in most sectors is 0. We don't have paternity leave as per the law. However, that doesn't mean that a lot of the organizations do have longer maternity leave and do provide paternity leave as well. I'd like to also highlight another main finding was that poor work-family balance posed a threat to the health of working Qataris. And here specifically, I'll look at the percentage of 65.1% of women in comparison to 28.1% of men reported feeling depressed, regularly down, or hopeless when imbalance between their work and family life is found. We also conducted a study on technology overuse amongst adolescents in Qatar. This was just a preliminary report which was published in 2021 in partnership with Hamad bin Khalifa University, the World Innovation Summit on Health, and the World Innovation Summit on Education. And the report provided initial findings related to parental views on the topic of excessive technology use by their adolescents. Now, some of the main findings of that report were that almost all parents found that technology use has negative impacts on their children and that their relationship with technology is not healthy. But then another main finding was that we asked parents if they knew of any source or services or help information that could support them in dealing with the issue of excessive internet use. And while 174 parents answered the question, out of which 98.28% said that they were not aware of any services that could help them deal with the issue of excessive internet usage of their adolescents in Qatar. We also conducted a project on adolescent well-being in Qatar, which we're now calling Tanshi'a. This was conducted in 2020, where we did a pilot study on 7 schools in Qatar. We implemented a survey on 1,157 participants, and that was the year that COVID hit. So we ended up reframing the entire study to pre-COVID and then during COVID. And so pre-COVID, it was conducted on 1,157 participants. And then during COVID, it was conducted on 442 participants, all on adolescents aged between 12 and 15 years. Now, there was a lot of statistics that came out of this project, but then one statistic that I'd like to highlight was that 5% of adolescents stated that they never received emotional support from their mothers, and then 11% stated that they never and rarely received emotional support from their fathers. Fast forward to 2022-2023, where we partnered with the Ministry of Education and Higher Education and conducted a quantitative study with 76 public schools in Qatar on a sample of 9,046 adolescents between the ages of 10 and 18, which was followed by a presentation of these findings to policymakers in Qatar. And I'll come back to this at the end of my presentation. So if we look at all the research that was that specifically talks about some certain aspects on parenting, there are some key outcomes that we can take out of it. Commonalities within the research that we found. First is that the gender division in care, which of course is in line with global trends as well. Also the lack of knowledge in how to deal with adolescents and youth. And thirdly, that work-family balance is definitely an issue for parents. So to bring it all together, I want to take you back to the initial impact model that I talked about, linking research, policy, and advocacy together. The RPM. So research has been conducted and findings have been published. Well, what happens next? الطفل. So this is where policy comes in. The policy, it has to be, I think one important factor is that there needs to be an enabling policy environment. And within that enabling policy environment here in Qatar, there is already a focus on the family and the importance of supporting families. And as part of that commitment to supporting families, we do have a National Committee for Women, Children, Elderly, and Persons with Disabilities under the auspices of the Ministry on Social Development in the Family. And it is within this committee, I would say it represents our gateway towards being able to raise policy recommendations, because DIFI does have a seat in this national committee. And we've already, based on our findings and the evidence, we've raised multiple policy recommendations. And some examples are that we've called for implementation of flexible working arrangements across all sectors in Qatar. We've also called for an increase in maternity leave to 98 days and an implementation of paternity leave for at least a week, as well as an implementation of childcare facilities in the workplace. Now, the policy, though, can't happen without some form of also working with partners and partnerships as well towards trying to implement some of the recommended policies and programs. So some examples of the partnerships that we have in relation to parenting are that we're currently developing a 5-year plan on scaling up of parenting education programs in the Arab region, and this is being conducted in partnership with UNICEF. Now, in relation to our adolescent well-being findings, we presented our findings to policymakers and parents and school representatives. And in 2023, Tanshia was born, which is a nationally implemented program on adolescent well-being in Qatar, and being led by the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. Now, as the policy and partnerships and research all go through hand in hand, now we've got the advocacy on one side, kind of I think representing an umbrella where it is linked to research, policy, and partnerships. And in advocacy, so as we're doing all of that in advocacy, we're also calling for certain campaigns, trying to nudge the community, trying to nudge the policymakers. And so, for example, we are undertaking a national scale advocacy campaign to nudge parents to commute their kids with required policy change in terms of flexible working arrangements. And we're also currently developing an advocacy plan where we are planning on campaigning for the development and implementation of a national parenting education program in Qatar. So I think, to conclude, in order for institutions to support policy that advances parenting, there needs to be, number one, an enabling environment, and a lot of the policy recommendations need to be evidence-based. So evidence is really important in order to be able to then take it forward, and while partnering with other organizations, try to advocate for these evidence-based policy development and implementation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's really comprehensive. I encourage our participants, if they have any questions, something to raise, you can do that in the chat box. Please go ahead. And in the meantime, I'm calling Dr. Amal Zika, who's representing today Ministry of Social Solidarity of Egypt. She's going to actually tell us more about the case of Egypt, how they have actually used social protection sector program for policy support to parents. Over to you, Dr. Amal.
الصوت واضح كده؟ مساء الخير. الو.
ايوه صوت واضح.
طيب الحمد لله. شير سكرين. مساء الخير عليكم. احنا الحقيقه وزاره التضامن الاجتماعي ليها باع جامد جدا في البرنامج الوطني للتربيه الاسريه الايجابيه. يمكن وزاره التضامن هي اللي بتقوم بلجنه الوطنيه المسؤوله عن التربيه الاسريه الايجابيه، هي رئيسه اللجنه معالي الوزيره، وعشان كده معانا شركاء اخرين. الحقيقه الشركاء هقول ان هم كل الوزارات المعنيه بالتربيه الايجابيه، بالاضافه طبعا للMCA اللي هو المجلس القومي للطفوله والامومه. بس لو ممكن نكست سلايد. نكست. الرؤيه بتاعتنا ان الاطفال والمراهقين يتمتعون بصحه ورفاهه وفرصه للمشاركه. التربيه الايجابيه عندنا هي عمليه مستمره طبعا، عشان وهي اهمها تقويه الروابط السليمه بين المسؤولين عن رعايه الاطفال، سواء اباء، امهات، اسر بديله، تعليم. احنا واخدين كل المراحل من اول 0 ل 6، المرحله الثانيه من 6 ل 12، المرحله الثالثه من 12 ل 18. علشان كده احنا بنقول ان التربيه الايجابيه دي بتعكس القواعد والقيم، وهي دي اهم حاجه في اي مجتمع حضاري او ثقافي، وهي دي اللي بتدل على درجه التطور الاجتماعي والاقتصادي والثقافي والسعي. نكست. نكست بليز. هو ليه مش مخلينا احنا شويه؟ طيب احنا كان عملنا بحث تكويني في سنه 2020، وبناء على البحث التكويني ده احنا بدانا البرنامج التربيه الاسريه. وكان الحقيقه البحث ده اتعمل على الاسر الاولى بالرعايه، اسر تكافل وكرامه، وبعدين بقى جالنا المسح الصحي السكاني كان سنه 21. يمكن الارقام ما اختلفتش قوي، بس يعني هي دي اللي اعتمدنا عليها في برنامج التربيه الاسريه الايجابيه. فكان الحقيقه حاجه جامده قوي ان 81% من الاطفال من سن 1 ل 14 سنه بيتعرض لممارسات عنيفه، سواء بدنيه او نفسيه. طبعا الكلام ده كان برضو في اسر برنامج تكافل والكرامه، كان في 78% من السيدات بيتعرضوا مع العنف، وطبعا بتسكت علشان تحافظ على كيان الاسره. الحاجات اللي اوضحت الدراسه فيها ان في 52% من النساء مجني عليهم. دي الدراسه دي اتعملت مع المركز القومي للبحوث الاجتماعيه، وهم اللي قالوا ان الزوج بيبقى تحت تاثير المخدر، فعشان كده بيتعرضوا للعنف. نكست. احنا طبعا عندنا نقاط زياده اولويه وعندنا فجوات، لكن احنا لازم نقول ان احنا التحديات بتاعتنا محدوديه المعرفه والمهارات. طبعا عندنا كثير من الاباء والامهات ومقدمي الرعايه عندهم نقص في المعرفه والمهارات اللي هي لازم تبقى في ممارسه التربيه الايجابيه. عندنا طبعا ظاهره العنف ضد الاطفال، ودي فيها تفشي، وخاصه العنف الجسدي او العاطفي او اللفظي. عندنا طبعا في تحديات صحيه وتغذويه. الانيميا عندنا من اهم المشاكل الصحيه في الاطفال اللي اقل من 5 سنين، واعتقد ان في هنلاقي في نقص في الرضاعه الطبيعيه المطلقه اللي هي المفروض تكون في ال6 شهور الاولانيين. عندنا طبعا الممارسات الضاره اللي يا رب نقدر نقضي عليها، زي زواج الاطفال وختان الناس. دي الحاجات اللي بتاثر طبعا على الصحه النفسيه، وبتبقى لها تاثير بيعوق فرص التعليم او النجاه منها. اهم حاجه بقى ان احنا الوصول للخدمه بتاعه التربيه غير متاحه، ويمكن عندنا او حته الحضانات او الطفوله المبكره ما فيش فيها اقبال كبير، وده يمكن الاباء ما بيقدروش يودوا اولادهم، او فيها تحديات من ان هي تبقى البيئه راعيه لاطفال. نكست. طيب احنا يمكن الكلام ده انا قلته قبل كده، فممكن نعديها دي ان احنا سلطنا الضوء على النماذج الايجابيه، وان احنا لازم نعزز النشء في التربيه الاسريه. عايزين نعالج الفجوات بتاعتنا. احنا السياسات العامه بتاعتنا طبعا مهمه قوي ان كل الوزارات تبقى بتتكلم بنفس الرسائل ونفس الاسلوب. طبعا مهم قوي الميزانيات اللي بتبقى دعم للسياسات بتاعتنا او للبرامج بتاعتنا. عايزين القدرات المؤسسيه دي تبقى حاجه لانها هي دي اللي فيها كل حاجه، وهي دي اللي بيعتمد عليها المسؤولين، لان هي دي اللي بتطبق المساواه او تعزيز الخطاب بين المساواه بين الجنسين. عايزين وصول الخدمات، سرعه الوصول للخدمات. نكس. احنا طبعا عندنا سياسات دعمه وعندنا استراتيجيات، ويمكن الاستراتيجيه القوميه للطفوله والامومه، عندنا الاستراتيجيه الوطنيه لتنميه الطفوله المبكره، عندنا استراتيجيه وطنيه للتغذيه، استراتيجيه وطنيه للرعايه البديله، استراتيجيه القوميه للسكان، عندنا استراتيجيه القضاء على العنف ضد الاطفال في مصر. كل الاستراتيجيات دي بتبقى معانا علشان نقدر نبتدي، ما بنبتديش من السترين، ما بنبتديش من الزيرو. نكس. عندنا بقى كوزاره تضامن، عندنا الحقيقه تنميه الطفوله المبكره، عندنا الحضانات، بنتوسع في برامج الحمايه الاجتماعيه اللي هي الكاش ترانسفير للتكافل والكرامه، سواء ال1000 يوم، في تدخلات للعماله الغير منتظمه. عندنا اهم حاجه ان احنا عايزين ما يبقاش في مأسسه للمؤسسات الرعايه ونستبدلها بالاسر البديله. في برامج التواصل المجتمعي والاعلام الجماهيري، عندنا وعي التنميه المجتمعيه، عندنا منصه التواصل التفاعلي اللي هو الرابط جو، عندنا تدخلات توعويه مباشره وخاصه في قرى حياه كريمه اللي هي المبادره الرئاسيه. طبعا علشان ندي كاش ترانسفير في حاجه اسمها مشروطيه التعليم والصحه، شرط ان الام والاب يودوا اولادهم التعليم ويبقوا منتظمين في الدراسه، واهم حاجه الحفاظ على صحتهم ان هم في ال6 سنين الاولانيين يكونوا بيتابعوا في وحده صحيه. احنا عندنا منهج موحد للتربيه الاسريه الايجابيه، وده اللي بنستخدمه مع كل المعنيين عندنا في قضايا التنميه الاجتماعيه وقضايا الاسره. حطينا دمج قضايا التربيه الاسريه في الخطط بتاعتنا والبحوث اللي هي بتنفذها وزاره التضامن. عندنا نظام متابعه الحقيقه، والمتابعه دي مهمه جدا جدا علشان نتاكد ان ممارسه التربيه الاسريه ايجابيه. احنا بنشتغل الحقيقه في اطار ونهج شامل. بنبتدي من اول الفرد، وبعدين الفرد للافراد، للمجتمع، للمستوى المؤسسي، للسياسات الداعمه. فكل المستويات احنا شغالين عليها، وكل المنصات عندنا كل المجالات اللي بنقدر عليها، سواء المؤسسات الشباب والرياضه، المدارس، الخدمات المجتمعيه، الخدمات الحكوميه، القطاع الخاص، الكنيسه والازهر. كل ما يهم وكل المؤسسات عندنا داخله معانا كمنصات بنقدر نرتكز عليها ونطبق من خلالها التربيه الاسريه الايجابيه. اكس. احنا الاطار المفاهيمي زي ما قلت لحضراتكم ان احنا بنشتغل من اول الرعايه الاوليه اللي هي ال1000 يوم الاولى، وبنركز فيها على الرضاعه الطبيعيه والتغذيه ومتابعه النمو، وبعدين الطفوله المبكره طبعا لازم حضانه، والحضانه دي اللي هي بتنمي العقل والحركه بتاعه الاطفال في تنشئه اجتماعيه. يمكن احنا بنركز في المحاور بتاعتنا والاساس على مشاركه الاب، ويمكن مشاركه الاب دي من الحاجات اللي هي مهمه جدا جدا. ويمكن احنا دخلنا في برنامج جديد اسمه العالم يحتاج الى اب، لان كانت كل الدراسات اثبتت ان تدخل الاب 7% تقريبا، يعني حاجه بسيطه جدا في تربيه الاولاد. فعشان كده بيهمنا جدا مشاركه الاب. كان لازم يبقى مشاركنا في التدخلات بتاعتنا، فعملنا يوم الاسره يوم الأسرة ده اللي هو بنعمل احتفالية للأسرة ككل، الأم والأب والأطفالهم، وهم بيعملوا مع بعض ألعاب وحاجات أشغال مهمة. نكس. بدأنا بقى اللجنة المشكلة من جميع الوزارات تقريبا المعنية، وده كان قرار من مجلس الوزراء إن وزارة التضامن هي اللي تبقى مسؤولة عن اللجنة القومية للتربية مشاركة. معنا كل الوزارات، تربية وتعليم، تعليم عالي، داخلية، صحة وسكان. معانا المجلس الاستشاري للعلماء، وزارة الشباب والرياضة، وزارة الثقافة، الأزهر والكنيسة، المجلس القومي للأمومة والطفولة، في جمعيات أهلية، ومعانا خبراء متخصصين. بعدها وضعنا الاستراتيجيه القوميه الوطنيه للتربيه الاسريه. الحمد لله ان احنا عملنا المسوده بتاعتها خلاص. كان الهدف، حطينا الهدف بتاعنا ان احنا ان شاء الله بحلول 2030 هتبقى في عندنا تكتمل المنظومه الوطنيه لدعم وتعزيز المعرفه وتنميه المهارات والثقه لدى الاباء ومقدمي الرعايه، بما في ذلك الاباء المتوقعون والمستقبلون. يعني احنا بنوصل للشباب كمان من اجل تعميم التربيه الايجابيه للاطفال الذين تتراوح اعمارهم من 0 ل 18. ويمكن الاهداف بتاعتنا كانت تعزيز المعرفه والمهارات الخاصه بالتربيه الايجابيه على المستوى الفردي، تعزيز البيئه الداعمه للتربيه الاسريه على مستوى السياسات والمؤسسات، ترويج الاعراف الاجتماعيه الايجابيه وتعزيز الدعم المجتمعي للتربيه الاسريه الايجابيه، دعم انتاج الادله والبحوث الوطنيه الخاصه بالرصد التقييم وتطوير مجال التربيه الايجابيه. الاستراتيجيه الوطنيه شارك فيها كل المعنيين معانا بالتربيه الاسريه الايجابيه. الاستراتيجيه احنا خلصناها، هي في عند كل طرف بيراجع علشان يحط الخطه والمستهدفات بتاعته. نكس. احنا عملنا تدخلات، ويمكن وزاره التضامن كان كل التدخلات بتاعتها الحقيقه او اي منصات عندنا كنا بنشارك فيها كتربيه اسريه ايجابيه. وزي ما قلنا من الاول ان احنا مستهدفين الثلاث فئات اللي هم اقل من 6 سنين ومن 7 ل 12 او من 6 ل 12 ومن 13 ل 18. عاملينها على كل المستويات، من اول الاتصال المباشر من خلال رائدات الاجتماعيات، من خلال الطفوله المبكره، الحضانات، الجامعات، دخلنا الجامعات للشباب من الجنسين، طبعا وسائل الاعلام الجماهيري ومنصات التواصل الاجتماعي. فكان كل تدخلاتنا من كل المنصات اللي نقدر ندخل من خلالها. ركز. احنا انتجنا 4 مناهج. المناهج بتاعتنا منهج التربيه الاسريه الايجابيه ودخلنا فيه التربيه المتوازنه. عندنا منهج للاسر اللي لديها اطفال ذوي اعاقه، عندنا منهج للاسر البديله، والمنهج بتاع الطفوله المبكره اللي هو منهج الحضانه. 4 مناهج تم عملهم مع وزاره التضامن وبرضه مع الشركاء من المحافظات وزاره الأمور. عندنا كمان لينك في منهج تدريبي رقمي، وده محطوط على الصفحه بتاعت الوزاره. الاسره اللي حابه تدخل من خلال اللينك تقدر تحصل على التدريب اللازم، وتبقى بتحط الاسئله لو ليها اي اسئله ممكن يتجاوب عليها. عندنا فيديوهات طبعا توعويه للتربيه الايجابيه. قدرنا نوصل لحوالي 4000 من مقدمي الخدمه في المنصات الحكوميه، وعايزه اقول ان احنا وصلنا ل 2 مليون مستفيد في التفاعل المباشر. احنا طبعا عايزين كل المتطوعين ومشاركه الشباب في الشغل بتاعنا، فعشان كده فتحنا باب التطوع. وباب التطوع ده كان في فعاليه معرض الكتاب، وده الحقيقه عشان كده احنا ما فيش اي فعاليه بتتم في وزاره التضامن الا لما بيبقى لنا وجود كتربيه اسريه ايجابيه. فمعرض الكتاب، في كان في كوادر من المدربين من اساتذه الجامعه، وكل واحد من استاذ الجامعه ده قدر يوصل ل 100 طالب، و100 طالب قدر ما شاء الله وصلنا لاعداد هائله، 600,000 شاب ومتطوع يوصلوا الرسائل لاسرهم ومجتمعهم. عندنا قاعده بيانات للراغبين في التطوع علشان المبادره اللي هي بتاعت خدمه ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصه، الاغاثه، خدمات صحيه، خدمات مقدمه للاطفال من خلال الجامعه. ورق دليل التدريب الالكتروني ده الحقيقه كان مع الاعمال بتاعتنا كلها، كان بدعم من منظمه اليونيسيف، هم مشهورين طبعا، واحنا هم اصحاب فكره دليل التدريب الالكتروني. عندنا سفراء للتربيه الاسريه الايجابيه من الفنانين والرياضيين والاعلاميين عشان ترسيخ مبادئ التربيه الايجابيه. احنا بننتج مسلسل حول التربيه الاسريه الايجابيه، ان شاء الله باذن الله يخرج قريب قوي للنور يا رب باذن الله. والدليل الاستشاري اللي احنا بنعمله ده ان شاء الله هيكون متضمن لكل الرسائل بتاعت التربيه الاسريه الايجابيه. بعدها نكست. طبعا اهم حاجه ما فيش برنامج من غير متابعه وتقييم، فكان لازم يكون لينا برنامج متابعه وتقييم. المتابعه والتقييم دايما بيتم عندنا من خلال منصه التواصل التفاعلي اللي هو الرابط جو. عندنا رقم للوزاره 1442 من خلال الSMS، ودي بتبقى سواء الاختبار القبلي او الاختبار البعدي او تسجيل المشاركين، كل حاجه بتتم من خلال المتابعه والتقييم عن طريق منصه التواصل التفاعلي. بشكركم جدا و
Dr. Amal, thank you very much for sharing such a rich experience regarding the work that you have done in Egypt for parenting. I really appreciate your contribution. We will be sharing the presentations with all participants. I see that there is one question for you, but in the meantime, please, I would really like to call Dr. Reza Pir Moradi from the Iran University of Medical Sciences to share how they have actually integrated domestic violence prevention into the primary healthcare system in Iran. Over to Dr. Primoradi. Mohammed, if you can play the recording. Mohammed W.
صدای چی بخش کنیم؟
Mohammed, there is no voice.
I only have the presentation, not recording.
You don't have the recording. Okay, so Dr. Primoradi, can you go through the slides, please? Can you talk to your slides, Dr. Primoradi? Because you're here in the session.
بله من
Can you?
رکورد رو قبلا خدمتتون فرستادم.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know why it's only there. So do you mind going through slides? Let me see, because it seems that my audio is not, it's not.
با سلام.
Can you?
با سلام خدمت همکاران محترم و عرض تشکر از مدیران محترم WHO که این کنفرانس رو طراحی و اجرا کردند. مبحث خود را که ادغام برنامه پیشگیری از خشونت خانگی در خدمات مراقبت‌های بهداشتی اولیه در ایران است آغاز می‌کنم. بخش مقدماتی. در ابتدا باید توضیحاتی در خصوص سیستم مراقبت‌های اولیه WHO میدهم. من نمیدونم الان اسلایدهای من شیر هست یا نه.
No, Dr. Muradi, we cannot see your slides. You have the presentation with you, right? Ah, bravo. Here it is. Yes, go ahead. Very good, thanks.
شما میخواین که به فارسی صحبت میکنین و از اینجا سلاید روان کنیم؟
در ابتدا باید توضیحاتی در خصوص سیستم مراقبت‌های اولیه خدمتتون عرض بکنم. جمهوری اسلامی ایران همگام با سایر کشورهای جهان در سال 1365 برای پیشبرد سطح سلامت جسمی، روانی و اجتماعی افراد برنامه کشوری بهداشت روان را تدوین کرد. در نخستین ارزیابی کشوری بهداشت روان که به وسیله دانشگاه علوم پزشکی ایران و دانشکده علوم رفتاری و سلامت روان و سازمان بهداشت جهانی انجام شد، 266 خانه بهداشت، 91 مرکز بهداشت درمانی روستایی و 737 خانوار بررسی شدند. یافته‌ها نشان داد 37.5% فعالیت‌های آموزشی بهورزان مربوط به بهداشت روان بود و جلسه‌های آموزشی بسیاری نیز به وسیله کاردانان یا پزشکان عمومی برای کارکنان زیر پوشش یا جمعیت عمومی تشکیل شده بود و ادغام برنامه بهداشت روان در سامانه مراقبت‌های بهداشتی موجب شناسایی و تحت درمان قرار گرفتن بیش از 6,000 بیمار روانی در مناطق مورد بررسی قرار گرفت. خشونت خانگی علیه زنان اغلب در منزل و در حضور کودکان اتفاق می‌افتد. وقتی زنان به عنوان والد قربانی خشونت خانگی هستند، ابعاد خشونت خانگی از سطح فرد خشونت دیده فراتر می‌رود. خشونت علیه زنانی که در نقش مادر قرار دارند بر فانکشن آنان در حوزه فرزند پروری تأثیرات جدی دارد. Please next slide. مادر به عنوان مراقب کودک خود در معرض خطر است و بخش زیادی از ظرفیت‌های او صرف پیشگیری از خشونت دیدگی می‌گردد و قادر نیست توجه کافی به نیازهای فرزندان داشته باشد و لذا دسترس پذیری هیجانی او برای فرزندان کاهش می‌یابد. Please next. Please next slide. نکته کلیدی آن است که بسیاری از زنان تحت خشونت به دلایل مختلف و پیچیده‌ای به زندگی در کنار همسر مرتکب ادامه می‌دهند و لذا نقش آنان به عنوان والد در طول زمان تحت تأثیر خشونت دیدگی قرار می‌گیرد. در واقع در حوزه خشونت خانگی علیه زنان با
Dr. Pir Muradi, we lost your voice. Can you hear us? Hello? Dr. Pir Muradi, can you hear us? Yeah, I think it's blocked. So colleagues, I'm trying to look at the time. We will be a bit, I'm afraid we have about 6 more minutes to finish the session. So I would really love you to think about issues that you think are important to be raised. I think these were very interesting presentations. And let me check, because I also have a pre-recording, if I can share it at some point. Just a second. I don't know, Mohammed, if I can share, because this one, okay, good, let me try.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, let me try. And I think this was really an interesting presentation, but let's hope I can play it.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Please,
Afrodita,
next.
would you like to have Dr. Pir Moradi begin from where he started, where he
Yes.
ended when Wissam went off?
Dr. Pir Moradi, can you
continue?
just, yes, but we don't have much time. If we have only 3 minutes to complete, and if you can just wrap it up, because then we will be taken to the main room, please. And over to you.
بله، من ادامه رو میگم خدمتتون. برای حمایت از مادران قربانی خشونت همسر طی سالهای اخیر در ایران از ظرفیت‌های نظام مراقبت‌های بهداشتی اولیه استفاده شده که در این سخنرانی به مرور این تجربه و خلای موجود خواهم پرداخت. Please next slide. در ابتدا لازم می‌دانم اشاره کنم که در ایران از 1986 بهداشت روان در نظام مراقبت‌های بهداشتی اولیه ادغام شده و در سالهای 2016 مؤلفه سلامت اجتماعی در بخش بهداشت روان گنجانده شده که خشونت خانگی نیز به عنوان بخشی از سلامت اجتماعی محسوب می‌شود. PHC به دلیل پوشش همگانی خدمات سلامت برای غربالگری سوء رفتار با زنان فرصت ویژه‌ای فراهم می‌کند. زنان در ایران در مراحلی از زندگی، مثلا برای مراقبت‌های بارداری یا واکسیناسیون، پلیز نکست، یا به مراکز خدمات جامعه سلامت مراجعه می‌کنند که در مناطق مختلف شهری و روستایی دایر است و خدمات رایگان برای عموم ارائه می‌دهد. لذا امکان غربالگری خشونت خانگی در جمعیت عمومی از این طریق فراهم می‌گردد. پلیز نکست اسلاید. ساختار غربالگری خشونت خانگی در PHC: برای هر مراجعه کننده به مراکز جامعه خدمات سلامت پرونده سلامت الکترونیک تشکیل میشه که در حال حاضر غربال خشونت خانگی در زنان یکی از اجزای اصلی این پرونده که در کنار غربال مصرف مواد و اختلالات روانی توسط مراقب سلامت انجام میپذیرند. استفاده از PHC پلیز نکست اسلاید. استفاده از PHC برای غربالگری خشونت خانگی مبتنی بر رویکرد جامعه محور نسبت به خشونت خانگی است. در سطح اول مراقبت سلامت در سطوح کمتر تخصصی نسبت به شناسایی موارد خشونت، ثبت موارد در پرونده الکترونیک و ارجاع اقدام می‌کنند. کارکنان این سطح دوره‌های آموزشی کوتاه مدت و بروشورهای آموزشی دریافت می‌کنند و موظف هستند درباره تجربه خشونت فیزیکی از سوی همسر سوالات کاملا مستقیمی از زنان بپرسند. next slide. در سطح دوم چنانچه نتیجه غربالگری در سطح دوم مثبت باشه به غربالگری تکمیلی ارجاع میشه و بر اساس سطح خطر و نیازهای کیس خشونت دیده اقدام به ارائه بسته‌های خدمت استاندارد میشه که به صورت تخصصی خشونت خانگی تدوین شده. محتوای این بسته‌ها شامل اطلاع به پلیس، تدوین طرح ایمنی با مشارکت مراجع و توانمندسازی اوست و در سطح سوم به سطح بالاتر که سطح تخصصی است ارجاع داده میشه. اسلاید بعدی. یکی از ویژگی‌های مدل ادغام خشونت خانگی در PHC ارائه انواعی از متون آموزشی است که برای جمعیت‌های مختلف تدوین شده. وقتی نتیجه غربال خشونت خانگی منفی است، متون و بروشورهای مختص جمعیت عمومی به زنان ارائه می‌شود. همچنین متون آموزشی برای ارائه دهندگان خدمت در سطوح مختلف، مراقب سلامت، پزشک عمومی، کارشناسان سلامت روان تدوین شده که در کنار دوره‌های آموزش مورد بررسی قرار می‌گیرد. با تشکر از توجه شما.
Dr. Pir Muradi, thank you so much. I really appreciate being patient with us and for actually presenting an interesting example of how you managed to build in interesting work, especially with a focus on violence prevention within the primary health care using mental health program, national program, which has a very, how to say, a long history back in 80s. I think that this was an interesting presentation. I just want to see that there was a question raised from Fatima to Egypt speaker, Dr. Amal, and I think she already responded. It's about mainly the challenges that they faced when they've actually tried to implement the strategies that she was mentioning. So actually, this is one of my questions that I wanted to raise with all of you, and I don't know if we have time, Mohammed, whether we are going to be put back in the plenary, but I just wanted to check if any of the speaker, maybe Dana or Dr. Pir Muradi, and I think Dr. Amal already responded on that, in terms of what have been some key challenges that you have faced when in implementing the policies and the programs, something that really can help us shed light about what we should learn, what is the key lesson learned from the difficulties that you have faced, something that you think is important. Dana, just quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Afrodita. I think I
من
was
اجازه
actually
میخوام که اگر بتونم پاسخ بدم خدمتتون.
Dr. Pir Murad, shall you wait just 1 minute? 1 minute, Dana, and then Dr. Pir Murad. Just quickly, just one statement.
Okay, that's difficult, but okay, I was gonna say that I think some of the challenges that we're facing, especially when it comes to parenting education, is that a lot of the programs look at the early childhood development, whereas when we're doing the research, we're actually realizing that there's a strong need from parents to focus more on adolescent and on behavioral issues in relation to their adolescents at home. And I think, I mean, if you'll allow me just maybe one more statement, is that sometimes we need to, I feel, look a little deeper into the issues. Like, for example, one of our research looked at the importance of having parents commute their children to schools. You know, we realized that a lot of abuse was happening during that period towards children when they're with drivers and nannies heading to schools. But then when we digged a little deeper as to why that was happening, then the parents said, well,
we can't commute our kids with school when our workplaces do not provide us with flexible working hours to leave and to drop our kids and pick them up, etc. So I think sometimes, I mean, it's really interesting here from everything that I'm hearing is that the multi-level partnerships on all the different levels, and I think that's critical in order to succeed in any form of policy or program implementation.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks a lot. Thank you, my dear. Dr. Pir Muradi, just quickly, one of the key challenges that you have faced. Can you, Dr. Pir
بله
Muradi?
چشم، حتما خدمتتون هستم. اولین مطلبی که میخوام خدمتتون بگم در حقیقت مقاومت برخی از بانوان در غربالگری به دلیل مسائل فرهنگی و مطلب بعدی این هست که مراجعه نامنظم برای شرکت در جلسات مشاوره و سومین مشکل دوری راه به عنوان یک مانع برای آموزش هست و جنبه‌های فرهنگی خدمتتون گفتم به خاطر فاصله‌ای که بین مشکلات جسمی و مشکلات روانی هست، یعنی شناختی که از مردم از مشکلات جسمی دارن بسیار بیشتر از مشکلات روانی است و برای همین مقاومت بیشتری برای مراجعه برای مشکلات روانی داره.
Thank you. Thank you much. I think this was very, very interesting. I really appreciate your time and your contribution, and also for our participants who've been patient to listen to, and some also had some comments. Therefore, thank you again. Thank you so much. And I think we will have, everybody has to move to the plenary, right, Mohammed?
Yes, I will close the breakout room now. Just give me 1 second.
So are we back both from both the breakout rooms? All right, good. So as you would see from the program that we have this time when there is group report back from the session. So I would request it from the moderators of the session to say in about 5 to 7 minutes what were the sort of salient points of discussion, any specific recommendations or any challenges stemming from the discussion you had in your groups. So maybe we can start with group B, and then go to group A. So is that all right with you, Mohammed? Would it be all right if you can say in about 5 to 7 minutes, sum up the discussions you had in your group, and if possible, give us some, action points or recommendations. Over to you.
Okay, so yeah, now I'm unmuted. Thank you so much, and thanks to the colleagues who attended the session B on parents' engagement. and the platforms to reaching parents. And we had 3 interesting presentations, one from Lebanon through which Lebanon case, which is Qudwa as well. They have showed the case of reaching out to people through multiple platforms. Also, in the second presentation, we had a presentation from Pakistan around faith-based platforms for reaching parents to end violence against children. And the third one was like reaching parents through midwives, mobile midwives in Afghanistan. For Qudwa, they are using social and behavior change kinds of approaches. They're working more on the social aspect of engaging parents and using community engagement platforms and community engagement ways of reaching out to platforms. They also giving up the idea of raising awareness to changing behavior rather than doing more of community mobilization, enabling environment for the communities. They're also using a lot of platforms to reaching out parents, male parents and female parents, where they want to be reached. And most of their program is kind of human-centered design program where people decide how to be reached and when and why to be reached. And this is one of the examples where we reach out to people where they are without costing them any efforts or even money to reach us. And this is Qudwa program, and one of the best examples when it comes to do more of community-led, community-designed programming. So we come up with our programs using people insights and people engagement. The other presentation was on faith-based platforms, and we know in MENA this is like an area where the 3 Abrahamic religion have started. And people are religious. Faith places are definitely the destination for the majority of the population in the MENA region. In Pakistan, they have mobilized community leaders and faith leaders towards ending violence, and they localized it in a way that people that faith leaders act upon violence against children, and they use them as part of the mechanism to ending violence and referring cases to seek support. They also build a capacity building program for faith leaders and communities to ensure the sustainability of the program. And during the pandemic, this was also a time where that program got scaled up. The last program, unfortunately, we couldn't finish it all due to the recording issues, but the project aimed at targeting the most vulnerable women in urban areas in Afghanistan through home-based visits. The mobile midwives they have provided multiple services to mother parents and to other parents and to male parents. And it was like an antenatal, postnatal care, and also breastfeeding counseling, provision of essential medication, and referral to other public health services. One of their main lesson learned is the importance of reaching out to IDP camps with establishing, while ensuring establishing a trust between the midwives and between the NGO and also the community, especially the conservative communities. And they're also doing more, or one of the lessons to do more home-based services for women, help to overcome the barriers around access, especially in Afghanistan. We know the challenges. A lot of challenges have been faced by TDH in that program. Restrictions on women employment is one, and we know that this is becoming an issue in Afghanistan over the last year and a half. A closure of IDP camps, restriction on reaching out to parents, and also data management kind of accuracy when it comes to data, and the diminishing of funding to those camps and to those kind of interventions. Those were the main points from the 3 presentations. And it's another a question that keeps coming up, Dr. Khalid, around how to reach out to parents. What kind of platforms? How do we find them? How to ensure that male parents are present on their session, which means we're challenging again the social norms around male engagement in parenting and the traditions. That's it from my side, and I think the platform is yours now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mohammed. Fadita, maybe we can move to you.
Yes. Yes, so colleagues, it was a very interesting actually session in terms of listening to extremely rich experiences from Qatar, Egypt, and Iran. And just let me summarize what we've heard from the presenters and and maybe some commonalities that came up as to wrap up the overall presentations and the issues that were brought up. So we did hear from the Doha Institute, International Family Institute. We heard about how actually institution can support policies to advance parenting. They've done interesting piece of work, always starting from generating evidence. They've done analysis of parenting programs in the Arab region. They've done work-family balance analysis or a report, and also a report about adolescents, the use of adolescents of technology or overuse. And it's interesting that how the analysis, the surveys that they've done, the studies that they've done in these three areas have really helped them design specific interventions. And most importantly, a model that they call impact model in terms of using evidence to actually design programs, interventions, and most importantly, recommendations, policy recommendations for the changes that need to be done. So just to give you an example, an interesting work has happened in terms of the work-family balance. They looked at the parents who in selected countries that have actually who are working parents, what are the issues that they are facing in terms of the support and care for children. It seems that it's the family policies that are not in line with the demands of the families and their needs. For instance, it's about unpaid or no paternity leave or limited maternity leave, and how that actually impacts negatively the caring and supporting children. On the other hand, the technology used by adolescents was also a report that has actually brought up to attention how technology use has a negative impact on children, and especially on adolescents, that is not really helping in their especially relationship with their within the family. And then what was interesting and striking was the finding that almost over 90% of parents who responded to the survey, they were not aware of any services that where they could seek support to address the issues and challenges in terms of overuse of technology by adolescents. And it's interesting also to mention that they've in Qatar, they've done a lot of work on using the evidence for policy recommendations and also strengthening partnership. They've developed a 5-year plan for scaling up of parenting education programs, and they also work a lot on national level advocacy, or they actually are using all the findings to develop a national level advocacy campaign, especially when it comes to a number of issues that parents are facing in the region, like for instance, calling for flexible working arrangements, or maybe helping parents who have to
Afrodita,
commute.
you have 2 more minutes, please.
Yes, and we've heard also from Egypt about a very strong social protection program that is reaching out to the most vulnerable parents, a Haya Karima program, which looks at how to support the parents coming from the poor economic and socioeconomic backgrounds, and also in developing a positive parenting program, which is being scaled up nationally. And the last one is Iran. Iran has a very long history of mental health, mental health as part of primary health care system, which actually has put lately a lot of focus on violence prevention, and violence prevention mainly looking at how actually the domestic violence is impacting mainly mothers, women who actually then are not in a position to care and to support the development of their children. So the biggest challenge that they faced, all of them, were mainly in the gap that they've seen, especially in Qatar's case, that there are not many programs and services for supporting adolescents from the parents' perspective, and that very often the programs that are being delivered are not reaching out to the ones most in need, mainly due to the remoteness, distance, and also it was interesting to mention that in in Iran they were also facing difficulties in terms of capacities that need to be in place to ensure and to have a stronger, let's say, presence and wide coverage, which I think was the case for all the three presentations that we've heard from. And thank you very much again for the session that was very, very rich, and unfortunately not enough time to cover everything that we had. And thank you so much. Over.
Thank you very much. Thanks, both of you, Ahmed and Afrodita, for this succinct presentation or summing up of the discussions during these parallel sessions. I'm aware that we are almost getting to the point when we should actually have closed. So I'll just take this opportunity to thank again all the speakers in the afternoon session who sort of set the stage, and for all the contributions during the parallel sessions. And what I hope is that these 2 days would mean that we would have the necessary analysis of the situation, or the sort of stock taking of the situation, awareness about the availability and the programs which are being implemented in countries at different stages, focusing on different issues, and using that information tomorrow to start thinking that how can we plan to move forward in making sure that this evidence is transformed and utilized to develop and advocate for policies, for programs, and for interventions for making sure that the children and adolescents reach their full potential with this parenting interventions. So thank you very much, all of you again, and I wish you all a good rest of the day or evening, wherever you are. Bye from this room. If there are anybody wants to say anything last minute, please, this is the opportunity. You would have about 30 seconds more before we close. All right. Thank you very much. All of you have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.